One chapter at a time. Book 1. By K C Garten. Disclaimer. One chapter at a time is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, places, or events are either the product of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or real-life events is purely coincidental. The author is not responsible for any interpretation, application, or use of the material in this book. The opinions and perspectives expressed within belong solely to the characters and do not necessarily reflect the author's views. About the author. The Big K, aka writer-advocate Catherine Garten, found her creative voice in both writing music lyrics through her poetry and her many novels, while serving a long, unjust sentence in federal prison as a first-time offender. She has shared her struggles through her writings. Hopefully, it will motivate people to be kind to each other. She, upon her release, decided that all her works would help to aid in creating a voice for those who are forgotten to be heard. She, after the loss of her young daughter, pledged to help the largest marginalized group regardless of race or social status. The young single mother of which she was one, and both her daughters are too. Single mothers have the least amount of resources to aid in their selfless journey. The Big K lives in Florida with her musician partner of 30 years and their late daughters' cats, Frances and Elizabeth. Chapter 1. Pulling into her parents' driveway after driving 8 hours from Vermont. She was coming home from being away at freshman year of college. Thinking to herself it's going to be a long, hot summer. While staring out the windshield of her car, she is staring at the 2-story, 5-bedroom colonial as it will give her a welcoming greeting. Still with her foot on the brake, deciding whether to shove the gear into park or possibly into reverse. Escaping or staying, the tug of war she was dealing with in her mind. She begins to say silent prayer to thank God for getting her home safely. Remembering the semi-truck that barely left in one piece while swerving off the road in the wee hours of the morning. She turns over in her mind the experience that almost left her as a splat on a dark, desolate roadway in the middle of New England. She thought in horror, visualizing the 18-wheeler carrying some kind of healthy food product by its reflective advertising spread across its side. The roadway barely lit up by the few highway traffic signs that say, 55 stay alive. This is the legal speed limit everyone does when the world is awake, but when there is nobody around, the speed demons come out and play a form of bumper tag with drivers who are hardly ever on the roads like me. Noticing in her side view mirror while trying to find a good song on the radio at that time of night. Hey, is he kidding? Hey, buddy, you are getting too close. She thought she could see inside the truck's cab, thinking maybe the bald man with the Patriots cap on her head. Kathy's father loved the Patriots. They used to watch the Super Bowl together every year. This guy she thought was falling asleep or worse, drunk behind the wheel. She decided since it was very late and that truckers drive long hours, she was leaning more toward the former. Either way, she thought she was a goner. She watched in horror as the 18-wheeler carried some kind of healthy food product down to the food stores in the storybook, like suburbs she grew up in. She kept playing it back in her mind. IT was like a reel of film that no matter how many times she edits IT, not believing her luck, not being slammed into a guardrail in the dark of night. Her father, she recalls, told her once of one of the amazing stories of his near brush from death. He has encountered numerous situations while commuting to the city where he worked, when he was driving along the East River Drive highway of New York City near city limits. No, not the same situation as she just encountered not more than mere hours ago. She did not try to save another's life like her father, just her own life was in peril. The way the law of physics works, her father told her as he narrated his near-death story to his daughter, that no two things can occupy the same space at the same time. He said, so he moved into the space meant for another as he took the space of crashing into the East River Drive wall. Picturing his move in her mind's eye as she had seen with her near miss on that desolate, dark roadway last night. That trucker tried to occupy and edge into the space she was occupying at the time. She gasped before taking a deep breath while making the sign of the cross after the now-past close call. Then she hit the accelerator hard to get herself away from that trucker so there was no chance of a repeat performance. She sensed danger, and her automatic human reflex of fight or flight got her out of there to the safety of the other cars on the 3-lane dimly lit highway. Spotting a sign for the nearest rest stop ahead 3 miles. She traveled down 3 miles and spotted the other sign that read, "Rest stop ahead." She pulled in and waited patiently until her little heart stopped hammering in her chest. Her mind brought her back to seeing the crumbled metal of her father's car while standing with her mother in front of the truck that pulled the wreckage or what was left of it to the towing yard outside the limits of New York City. Her mother spent many days, nights kneeling, thanking God for saving her husband's life and not making her a young Irish widow with young children. Oh, her mother couldn't see herself crying for the rest of her life, and she did not like the color black. Her father had cheated death the way the main character had done in the movie she just saw a few nights ago with him. This was the reason for her long drive home to the island, to clear out her head and possibly make some important life decisions that would change the trajectory of her life. There was a scene in the movie that the main character had cheated death a few times within the confines of more than 90 minutes. He barely escaped several times, with his life changing the future for everyone in the movie. Just for a moment, she thought, would I come to the same end? She let that thought hang in the air because, after seeing how her mother was with her father's accident, she did not want to even go there. She tried to put it out of her mind, but it just kept sneaking back in. Her thoughts were at times her worst enemy. Going back to her mother, who spent many days and nights on her knees, sometimes shouting at God in anger, and other times thanking him for not making her a young widow with 5 young children to take care of on a nurse's salary, it was her mantra. She looked over at her family home. It was one of the nicer, more up-to-date ones on the block. There were about a dozen or so homes on her block. Her family home rested on a half-acre wooded lot in the back and a lush green pasture of a lawn in the front. Her father was so proud of his work when it came to his landscaping talents. He loved lush green pastures, being born in Ireland. The family home rested at the crest of the hill. It is probably the reason she thought the road was named appropriately Pine Hill Road. The road was lined with mature pine trees originally planted when the builder Levitt developed the neighborhood more than 30 years before. It was a good place to raise a family. The schools were located a few blocks from the massive houses within the community neighborhoods. This was how the suburbs were laid out on Long Island, NY, which was no more than 40 minutes to an hour from NYC, where most of the commuter fathers traveled by the LI Railroad to the major cosmopolitan Manhattan, New York. The neighborhood communities, unlike urban city areas, are composed of single-family stick-built homes. This is where most of the nuclear families grew up. The term nuclear family used to mean 2 kids and 2 parents, mom and dad. That was never the case for the Long Island suburbs. After the 60s, the family became large Irish, Italian, or of German descent. They were large broods of 5 or more children families, and their core values revolved around their church communities. The communities of churches mainly consisted of Judeo-Christian, as well as Roman Catholic parishioners. Her family was a large Irish-German Roman Catholic family. Her family was in the mid-range size household, the large colonial home which helped to raise her 3 brothers and her little sister, making the total number of kids in the Irish-German Catholic family. It was common to find that the neighborhood, like most of the neighborhoods, was conservative, and as you looked around, there were still signs of the last national election for Bush-Cheney for president and vice president. On both sides, you couldn't miss the sign saying, "Vote for Bush." It was the summer of 2001. It was after the 2000 election. George Bush, the son, not the father, the only candidate as far as this neighborhood was concerned, and most of the communities on conservative Long Island, NY, was now the 43rd president of the USA. The neighborhood was made up of God-fearing conservative Republicans. The world had not yet been shaken by the most horrific terror attacks on American soil. The typical suburbs were made up of professionals like doctors, lawyers, and a large medical population of medical personnel. The center of this neighborhood was the major hospital in the area. It was also the lifeblood of the economy of these suburban bedroom communities. It was where her mother worked as a registered nurse in the ORER division of the mega state-of-the-art hospital. It was the summer after the 2000 election. Our candidate, George Bush, the son, not the father, the only candidate as far as this neighborhood was concerned, was now the 43rd president of the United States. I came from many areas of LI. The neighborhood was made up of God-fearing conservative Republicans. The world had not yet been shaken by the most horrific terror attack on American soil. These suburbs were typically made up of professionals, doctors, nurses, lawyers, and the like. The lifeblood of the economy was the major hospital in the area, giving income to medical technicians, nurses, and doctors who tended to the residents of this sleepy bedroom community of LINY. Next was the public school education in this area was one of the most sought after on the whole East Coast. It was called the Little Beverly Hills of the East. Families flocked to the area like there was a clearance sale on the perfect American dream. The elementary school Kathy and her family attended, just a few blocks walking distance from her family home by the birchwood trees in the area called Birchwood Elementary School. The one I used to attend was a few blocks away from my home. Many times while growing up, I would find solace in that schoolyard with friends just hanging out there after the little kids had gone home for the week. This was our weekend hangout spot. All the teens in the neighborhood used the facilities, swings, jungle gyms. The boys used the grounds to play touch football, or the courts to play street hockey at this community elementary school I attended until transferring to Catholic high school. I would run the track at my high school that was a quarter mile away from my home. I had to put on my sneakers to make the long walk back to my mom and dad's home. My high school was located at the bottom of the hill I lived on, but that walk seemed endless, although it was barely a quarter mile. The walk helped me to go out for the track team. I remember receiving my first real kiss from a boy named Charlie who came from a different neighborhood than I did. My high school was full of all different students. Although it was a Catholic high school, it was full of many students that were Protestants, Jewish, other cultures and religions. Parents who wanted their children to receive a top-of-the-line education, who were discerning enough to recognize a place where the whole student could be educated. I wanted to be a part of that discerning group, so I used some of my savings from an accident I had as a child. This was a difficult time for me that led to my shyness and keeping myself isolated. It was this school that opened my world to desiring more for my future. She thought of this while still sitting in her car in front of her childhood home. She grappled with herself whether she should stay and finally come to terms with her nightmares, even though she was mostly unaware of the exact cause of those nightmares, but subconsciously believed it was time to discover what was lost to her in her waking life. I am now home from my freshman year. I need the wide open spaces to reflect on what I was feeling. I also don't know how I would tell my parents whether I would be going back for my sophomore year. Well, this was something I was not going to let leak into my mind. It has been too long of a drive to get deep into this kind of worrying right now. I am just too tired right now. Besides, I have all summer to make these decisions, she thought before she began to exit her vehicle, thinking I'm going to ask Dad to help me look for another car if I drive back to school. I hope he won't follow me here. He kept telling me he wanted to come with me. I managed to quell that desire in him to follow me, telling him adamantly I needed space to please respect my need to work this matter out by myself. She could never think clearly around him. It was too much for her to deal with while he was there putting ideas of staying together in her head. She also attended the Catholic high school in the area, while her brothers and younger sister attended the area high school played for the Wolverines. This was the leading high school in the area with a leading state football team. It boasted all of her brothers, while her younger sister was a cheerleader for the famed Wolverines. She attended the Catholic high school, which was about a quarter of a mile from the family home. She walked to school every day in her sneakers. She liked walking to school, and it allowed her to be alone in her own thoughts. It was her love of walking and running that got her a position on the track team. She was not much of an athlete like her sister. This bothered her while she was a year older than her younger sibling, who was the celebrity of the family. She knew she would walk the track at her old HS. She needed to think about what her future would be like. She still had not told her parents whether she would be going back to Vermont for her sophomore year. She had all summer to make that decision. I hope he does not follow me here. I need space. She thought to herself she was bringing to mind the heated conversation they had before she left school. He kept telling me he wanted to come, but she needed space. No, I need space, and my father will never understand or approve of his little girl being with a man who is older than her. But it was not the same. She was not sure that she even wanted to see him again. She began to read it, and as she read about the kinds of birth control, she could get her head started spinning. The whole idea of contraception began to take on a life of its own. Kathy thought, I need to talk to the nurse practitioner about this just in case. She still had. Not ever. Not at all. Okay, not yet. She might have been thinking about it. Maybe it was time to change her sex status. She was kind of telling to herself as if she was a coach telling her to give it her best shot. She told herself it's okay to be prepared for what might happen. All the things a coach says, but it was the last statement that rang loudly in her head. Kathy, better safe than sorry. So, in other words, let's not be one of the college girls that get knocked up and have to drop out of school to raise a kid you are not prepared to raise. Only this voice was not hers, but her mother's voice ringing through her ears. So many times her mother tried to give her advice about sex, or her mother tried to take her to see her own doctor. This was a friend of her mother's from when they attended medical school together many years ago. Kathy, after the traumatic event she experienced as a young girl, although never told anybody about what occurred. Kathy didn't really remember all of the details, but they were sneaking back into her subconscious while she slept. Mary, her sister, was a different story. She was so outgoing and protective of her big sister, it was becoming stifling. Kathy thought finally it was time for her to take over the running of her emotional life and suffer the pain, a coping mechanism. Her 18th birthday was in May. Still, she had not experienced what most girls her age had a committed relationship with. It was always there in the background of her life. She knew it would happen sooner or later. She admonished herself over and over again. She had many offers over the years. However, she was not ready for that kind of emotional commitment. The only one that even got close to that was Joey, her boyfriend. He was a friend of one of her older brothers, Francis. Francis Fitzpatrick was a few years older than Kathy, but wise beyond his age. He was wise, but in Kathy's orbit, he was trustworthy, and one of the good guys she knew would be there for her. Joey never really tried to take their relationship too far. He sensed that Kathy had some form of emotional block with the kinds of situations that had to do with being physical, so he just didn't go there. Kathy was only 16 years old when Joey was several years older. He was attending the medical program at a university in the local area, while doing part-time work at a neighborhood deli. This was to make tuition easier in his family. The mere fact that he was studying to be a doctor made Kathy's mother very happy, because she was a nurse and always wanted someone like a doctor of not her good fortune than for her daughters. But Kathy thought out loud, saying, I was not going down that road, not without a fight. It was not the being married to a doctor part. It was more the being told she was going to be a doctor's wife, and the hell with her chance at a career for herself. Joey would not hear of having a career or a job of any kind, not his wife. This idea she thought as she continued to sit outside in her car thrashing back and forth how the conversation she needed to finally have would go with her mother. Kathy wanted more than the Italian stallion. She definitely did not want to be in his stable. She wanted her own life, and she would get it for herself when she finally arrived at college as a freshman to achieve her dreams. Now Kathy has come home. Maybe she would drive by the deli in Hicksville to see what was going on with her old boyfriend. She figured Joey was now in his second year of medical school in the 5-year intern program. It had been more than 2 years since she had seen him. Kathy Fitzpatrick was home thinking as she watched the sleepy dwelling where she used to share a bedroom with her sister Mary. Before she left, she had moved to her own bedroom, no longer sharing a room with her sister. There were, as they say, irreconcilable differences. Her sister Mary wouldn't stop taking her clothes without permission. Now, she had 3 roommates, or quad mates as they are called that Kathy had been attending a small college for 8 months. She had grown petty squabbles that did not bother her anymore. She just missed her sister Mary and the rest of her family. Mary needed to understand a different Kathy Fitzpatrick would be walking in the front door of their family home. She was not the same shy, inexperienced little girl. Kathy Fitzpatrick thought to herself while standing there to ring the doorbell to wake her family up on Saturday morning. She barely got the thought out of her head. I wonder who will answer the door, when her mother was the one who opened the door to her little girl home from the academic trenches. She recalls her father telling her of one of the many amazing encounters of his brush with a near-death experience. When he was driving near the city limits on his way home from work one night, it was on the East River Drive Highway. This was the route that most of the commuters took from the big city out to the island suburbs. Her father got into an accident while taking the place of another to save their life on a slick and rainy highway. This thought she recollected after her experience of nearly dying while driving home on that dark, desolate roadway when the large truck nearly hit her. That truck making her a car swerved off the road to wind up nearly running her off the road. Her father used to tell her no 2 things can occupy the same space. This was her father's way of thinking with logic and reason, the law of physics. But Kathy was pretty sure that the driver with the eagle's cap tilted to show his receding hairline was not interested in anything having to do with the law of physics. Her father began the story with, "No two things can occupy the same space at the same time." This was not the case with Kathy's encounter that happened just a few hours ago. Picturing her father's movement in her mind's eye moved her into action, as she did that trucker trying to edge into the space she occupied at the time. She gasped before taking a deep breath. She made the sign of the cross after her near-death incident was over, and thankfully she was still in one piece. She then put her foot on the accelerator to get away from the spot so as not to repeat the last few minutes of her life. She sensed danger, and her automatic human response told her to flee to the safety of the other cars on the 3-lane, dimly lit roadway. She drove along until she spotted a sign for a rest stop exit pulling off to the shoulder to make her approach from the dimly lit highway until her little heart stopped hammering in her chest. She was still shaken. Her mind could not help but bring her back to memories of the crumbled mess of metal she saw when her mother took her to the city tow yard. She saw what her father's car looked like after that night her father plowed into that ominous wall on East River Drive. Kathy recalled how her mother spent most of her days and nights on her knees, thanking God for not making her a young widow with 5 young children. Her father had cheated death on that night. This also reminded Kathy of a similar scene she was watching in the movie with him, right before leaving to make that long, arduous drive home and away from him. The main character in the movie cheated death by barely escaping all the situations where his friends were not so lucky. He changed the future of everyone's life in the movie. Just for a moment, she thought, would I come to the same end? She left that thought hanging in the air because after how her mother reacted with her father's near miss, she did not even want to go there. She tried to put it out of her mind, but it just kept creeping back into her thoughts. Or her thoughts at times were her worst enemy. Her thoughts always brought her back to her mother, who spent many days and nights on her knees, sometimes shouting at God in anger. Other times thanking him for not making her a widow with 5 young children to take care of on a nurse's salary. This was her mother's mantra. Kathy looked over at her family home. It was one of the nicer, more up-to-date houses on the block. There were a total of 12 houses in that quaint storybook setting. Her family home rested on a half-acre at the crest of a hill. Her house was nestled amongst large pine trees that stood straight to the sky. Because of the tall pine trees, the road was appropriately named Pine Hill Road. The road was lined with mature pines originally planted when the builder developed the neighborhood more than 2 centuries ago. This was during times when people were asserting their freedoms, and the Theo country was in its infancy during the Revolutionary War. A war that gave this nation its chance to govern for itself. Kathy loved American history along with her father. They spent many weekends in his library studying antique letters from many famous historians during those times. It was one of Kathy's favorite times with her father. Kathy and her father were closer to each other than Kathy and her mother. Kathy was considered as one who would be called a daddy's girl. He would never understand the new relationship she was now having with him. The Fitzpatrick family home was in an area of Long Island which was pioneered by the first New Englanders to come to the New World. This she learned in her studies. The history of where she lived fascinated her. She loved studying the history of America. This was her reason for wanting to be a constitutionalist when she, God willing, became an attorney. The schools she attended were located very close to her home. The builder originally redeveloped the neighborhood more than 30 years ago. This was in tribute to those who shed their blood to make this nation free. The mass of homes was the kind of place where families grew, and there was infrastructure for the facilitation of that growth. There was a proverbial nuclear family mentality, even though most of the families in these area suburbs were more like the size of family clans. More than 3 generations of the same family lived close by to one another because that was the culture at the time when the neighborhoods first began. That was especially true with Irish, Italian, and German immigrant families, who most were of the Catholic religion. Kathy's family was an example of that type of family. The Fitzpatricks were well established in this bedroom community suburb of Long Island, NY. No family in these LI suburbs had less than 4 kids. Her family was in the mid-size range. There were some with more, but none with less than 4 kids per household commonly in many of these neighborhoods. The house which helped to raise her 3 brothers and 1 sister, Kathy making the total number of kids in the Irish-German Catholic family. It was commonplace to find that. The neighborhood was conservative, and as you looked around, you couldn't miss the signs saying, "Vote for Bush." It was the summer of 2001. George W. Bush, this son, was the only candidate as far as this neighborhood was concerned, and most of the communities on conservative Long Island, New York. He was our 43rd president of the United States of America. The neighborhoods of Long Island, NY, were made up mostly of God-fearing conservative Republicans who wanted to live out their lives safe and protected from the world at large. Suburbanites lived in a bubble of utopic life. They had not had this world shaken yet by one of the most horrific terror attacks on American soil, to be called 9/11. This neighborhood was one of the many suburbs of Long Island, NY. It was the suburban people from all over, not just New York, but other areas too. This was called the Little Beverly Hills of the East Coast. The name was given to the hamlet in the town of Huntington as Dix Hills, NY. People flocked to this area, especially ones with ideas of raising their families in good communities with top-flight schools to educate these families. The only catch to the migration was the families who were allowed to put their kids in these elite schools of education had to own a home in the district where the schools were located. The migration was like there was a huge clearance sale on the recently reduced, previously high-priced and demand item being offered for sale. Instead of just the Gold Coast crowd being invited to live a high-end elite life, now the families on the border of Nassau County could partake of the fruits of the same harvest. At one time, only families like Rockefeller, Roosevelt, and Carnegie. The elementary school in the community was located amongst large birchwood trees, so it was aptly called Birchwood Elementary. This was the one she used to attend with her 3 brothers and younger sister. She found solace in her later years of that school, along with her friends who used to hang out there when the little kids would leave the place for the older kids on the weekend, like Kathy and her friends. This was the hangout spot for all the teens in the neighborhood when they wanted to do things like play touch football and street hockey on the weekends. They would all get together and basically claim the property during the week that is used for the little kids to play on the swings and jungle gym to become the place for the older kids on the weekend. She attended this school until she became of age to attend a school for secondary education. She went from a public school to a private Catholic school. She was the only one of her family to attend this type of school. This was where she attained her love for God and His Son, Jesus Christ. She also likes to run, and when she entered the private Catholic school called St. Catherine's, she liked that it was named after her. She thought it might be a sign by God. So it made going to St. Catherine's special for her. She walked to the school that was a little more than a quarter of a mile from her family home. She would wear her sneakers every day and make the trek to the school. This made her interested in running on the girls' school track team. This is also where she received her first kiss from her first teenage boyfriend. She had a previous boyfriend, but that was a boy she sat in her father's chair in the afternoon with and watched Dark Shadows at age 7. It was a difficult time for her that led to her shyness and isolation. It was St. Catherine's that opened her world to wanting more for her future. She thought of this while still sitting in her car in front of her childhood home. She grappled with herself whether she should stay and finally come to terms with her nightmares, even though she was mostly unaware of the exact cause of those nightmares. She believed it was time to discover what was lost to her in her waking life. She was now home from her freshman years and needed the wide-open spaces to reflect on what she was feeling. She also didn't know how she would tell her parents whether she would even be going back to school for her next year. Well, this was something she had time to think about. It was a really long drive and she didn't need to put anything more on her plate. She was thinking before leaving her vehicle, if I go back to school, I will talk to my dad about possibly getting another car. She also had a wandering thought. I hope he will not follow me here. The he she was talking about was devoting most of her time to while away at school. She told him over and over she needed space and that her father would never understand or approve of his little girl being with someone older than her. He was a lot older than her. This was a dilemma. It would keep until she had some sleep. Chapter 2. I am Kathy Fitzpatrick. I live in a small bedroom community in one of the high-end suburbs of New York, Long Island. It was part of the state of New York. Long Island was one of the 5 counties. There was New York City, Staten Island, Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk County. I lived in the western part of Suffolk County. They called a county that bordered Nassau County. The county of Suffolk was the true suburbia, with its many golf courses, country clubs, and its quiet bedroom communities with names like Smithtown, Stony Brook, Commack, and Huntington. Huntington was a town that came about during the Revolutionary War, like many of the other towns that were part of the trails of stories about the famed Revolutionary War that created our country of democracy. This is the town where Huntington not only bolstered historical artifacts, but it was the place where Kathy Fitzpatrick's family had their homes for more than nearly 50 years. Parts of the town of Huntington dated back to the Revolutionary War times, especially parts that boasted the Rough Riders and other historical monuments. People come from all over to visit. The area my family lived in was an up-and-coming area with young families. The fathers were called commuters. Commuters that traveled by the LI Railroad every day to get to the city of Manhattan in the morning for their daily routine rat race and took those same rails back to their suburban homes in the evening to make it home for dinner at 7 p.m. 5 days a week. The communities of the suburbs rolled up the sidewalks at around 10 p.m. after the nightly news and the TVs switched off with the American flag as being the last picture before networks ended their nightly broadcast. Today, the TV never goes off, and cable is the new Saturday night date AP. Chapter 3. I was a petite brunette with big chocolate brown eyes. I hardly ever strayed from my private protected cocoon of Suffolk County LI. I rarely went to the city except for every year on my birthday. My parents, Bob and Regina, took me into the big city of Manhattan to see the latest Broadway musical to hit the Great White Way. I had seen them all while growing up. At one time in my life, I had dreams of taking the Broadway stage to be a singer and dancer. I had talents, but none of them were useful, especially not the talent of singing. Not because I couldn't sing, because on the contrary, I could have been a professional singer. But the problem was not my voice. It was that I was a very shy hometown girl. I never wanted anyone to hear me sing, or much less do anything except at church. I lived in the shadow of my little sister when we were young, only 2 years apart in age. We were thick as thieves. My mother would say to us, "You and your sister are like thieves." She meant we did everything together. Mary, my sister, took the lead when it came to being outgoing in sports. She was popular where I was more like a hermit hiding in a corner. Mary was the one who got blonde hair, blue eyes, and a good body. She was athletically inclined. It didn't suffice to say I got a great body. I was the one that everyone called this type of girl chunky. Everything I ate you could see on my hips and stomach. The areas where weight was hardest to lose on the women's body, more cushion than needed. Mary had a large group of friends, and I only had a couple who resembled girls like me, chunky and awkward with glasses, although my sight was 20/20. Mary was the one always invited to all the parties. I never got any invitations to anything, the last to be picked for everything. You know the girl that waits to be the last to be picked for the kickball teams? The one that never gets invited to the sleepovers, shopping outings to the mall or the movies. This was Kathy. Mary never wanted to go to the numerous invites, and they, her friends, if they wanted Mary there, they had to happily but begrudgingly invite her sister Kathy. I guess I was the consolation prize if anyone wanted Mary to come to any of their parties. Everyone wanted Mary Fitzpatrick. She was the popular one. The life of the party, so Kathy had to be invited too. That was then, and this is now. I had come into my own while I was away at college. I had many friends. My quad mates were and are my besties. My 3 friends and I did everything together. It was me, Allie, Phil, that was short for Phyllis, and my very best friend was Jasmine. Jasmine was my BFF of all the girls. So I kind of put him in my friend Jasmine's capable hands. You take care of him until I come back to school. I told my BFF Jasmine I had a radiance about me when I spoke of him, especially when I spoke of him with me. He was what they used to call a bad boy. But I was not the type to go with the bad boy. He knew everyone and ruled that college town of his. Like all girls in their freshman year at college away from their daddy's protective arms. I forgot all I had been taught in catechism class with Mrs. D for more years than I could count or even wanted to count. Oh no, I was getting that moist feeling down there. the place my mother said I shouldn't venture to until I got married? Well, that horse has left the barn. Kathy believed she thought it had to happen to a girl sometime. She picked up the pamphlet. The pamphlet she just peeked at sitting on the entryway table as she ventured into the clinic. I, Kathy Fitzpatrick, am only 18 years old and have never gone anywhere. Now I was back here. Again, back to being treated by her parents Bob and Regina Fitzpatrick like their little girl. None of them would have any idea that the shy hometown girl with the peaches and cream complexion and the wide eyes for adventure had finally seen some. The girl who was at one time afraid of her own shadow. Do you think her mother will notice that girl now? I wear makeup when I never did. That girl, their little girl, is no longer quite so little anymore. It's been more than 8 months, but you think they will notice that girl now has a flat stomach. Not just flat, but solid and svelte. You think my sister Mary, the popular one, will notice how much this girl has changed? Do you think they will notice how independent and confident this girl is now? The most important thing, will they notice their little girl has seen things she has never experienced before? Things they cannot protect her from anymore. Some things maybe she still wants to be protected from by her daddy's love, but other things definitely are not. Sorry, Mom, as she talked out loud to herself. Still frozen to her seat in her car, not sure how things would work out once she entered into her mother's world. Would they know that I, Kathy, has gone on that sexual exploration? Kathy's adventures were so much more than her friends ever made her believe. The conversations about it would never even come close to doing it justice. But she thought, well, it had to happen sometime. Kathy never even saw the inside of a clinic until she went away to college. One day, at first she noticed everyone staring at her. I was so self-conscious it almost made me not go in. The clinic in the little college town was actually a squat little building angled between 2 bigger buildings. It was not really a typical doctor's clinic. This was the place where all the girls from the college town came to get their medical needs met. These free clinics were set up so that nobody needed parental permission to be promiscuous. These places were private and accommodating. The procedure was part of the daily routine, a simple exam questionnaire, a physical exam called a pap smear, followed by a prescription. More like a license to have sex in a town overrun by college kids. The college town of Burlington, Vermont, ran amok with promiscuity like all college towns across the fruited plain of America. Kathy was entering a new stage in life. She needed to take it one chapter at a time. She was one of the little girls who grew up being taught to abstain before marriage. Now it was a different world. That part of her was self-conscious that she was doing something wrong. She opened that little booklet and knew she was about to embark on something scary, but yet she thought it was amazing. It was definitely going to be a new chapter in any girl's life. In Kathy Fitzpatrick's life, Chapter 4. Kathy's mother, Regina, was standing in the doorway with those high cheekbones, luminous green eyes, and curly strawberry blonde hair. She was so happy to see her little girl. "Hi, Mom." Kathy fell into her mother's open embrace. "Kathy, you didn't call, I was worried." "I'm sorry I got a late start last night. By the time I got to a rest stop, it was practically morning." "Well, you are here now. That is all that matters." "Yeah, sorry," Kathy said while walking in the door to stand in the marbled foyer in front of the staircase leading up to Kathy's old bedroom on the 2nd floor. "Daddy is still sleeping. Come with me in the kitchen. I just put on a pot of coffee." She made the gesture to her daughter. "You drink coffee now?" "Yes, I do, Mom. Black." "Okay." As they walked toward the large French country kitchen with its sunny peach-painted ceiling, its Dutch ceramic tiled floor, and new stainless steel appliances. This was her mother's dream. Not a dream anymore. There it was, the real thing. A tired Kathy was there, standing in her mother's world. This was the kitchen where her mother waited a long time to have her mother work hard to have it her way. This idea brought a smile to Kathy's already tired face. Regina looked over at her daughter, seeing her exhaustion, just sighed. "Okay, baby. Plenty of time to catch up after you've had a good rest." Kathy was not the kind of daughter who thought her mother was stuck in a 1950s episode of I Love Lucy, one of Kathy's favorite comedies, while her siblings were growing up. Kathy's mother was a career woman in the medical field, a registered nurse who worked at the large hospital in the community. Regina was happy with her kitchen, and everyone needed a space of their own, and this kitchen was Kathy's mother's space, a space to match her diverse, independent personality. To Kathy, her mother was a role model of the modern-day women. She could have both, like many liberated women of the late 80s and early 90s. Kathy's mother, even though she kept a warm, cozy environment for her family, she loved her work outside the home, helping people who were sick and needed nurses. Kathy just exhaled through her awakenings. She was really tired but wanted to spend as much time with her mother as possible before going up to go to bed. She also wanted to see her father before she went to her room to go to sleep. Her family was always on the go, and it was difficult to get them all in one place. Her mother worked really hard to become the person with good values to pass on to her own children the way they were passed on to her. It was probably because she was raised with good values by her mother before her and her mother before. There was a portfolio of accomplishments for 5 generations of women who came out of a German lineage. Chapter 5. Regina pulled 2 mugs from one of the large, custom-designed oak cabinets. There were at least 20 matching cabinets along the walls in that bright, airy kitchen. The natural light coming through the large terrace doors makes the kitchen even brighter. The southern wall of the large kitchen is made up of large terrace doors leading to a large yard with a manicured lawn and a large built-in goodnight swimming pool. Kathy's eyes gazed out the beautiful carved oak terrace doors with the early morning sun shining through. Kathy's mother, Regina, handed Kathy a nice large mug of black coffee. "It's Colombian roast," said her mother. Kathy reached out for the mug that had the saying on it, "Number 1, daughter." Kathy smiled brightly, receiving the mug from her mother's hand. Kathy took a sip of the brew. Thanks, Mom." Kathy's mother began to pour herself a cup of coffee into her mug. The mother was what was written on her mug. Regina took a sip from her mug. That is good, so talk to me." Kathy's mom put her mug down while she pulled out a thermos from the bottom of one of the cabinets. Kathy recognized the thermos her mother pulled out was the one she used to use when she carried her lunch to high school. "Mom, my thermos? Where did you find it?" A loud noise erupted from the top floor over Kathy's head. "Someone sounds like they are awake up there." Kathy's mom began to pour the rest of the pot of coffee into the Barbie Dreamhouse thermos. Mary came barreling down the staircase only to stop at the last step to tie the laces of her New Balance running shoes. She stopped into the kitchen to grab the thermos that her mother just finished pouring coffee into for her to take to her new job at the Town Square Mall. This was the mall where Kathy and Mary used to go shopping. She was running late for her new job and did not notice her sister before she ran into her in the kitchen. "Thanks, Mom," as Mary gave her mother a quick kiss on mouth while heading to dash out the front door. Just at that moment, she ran into her sister, whom she almost did not see. Kathy was just standing there, delighting in watching her little sister fly through the kitchen. "Easy, girl, you're going to run me over where to in such a hurry? I almost got run over today once already." Her mother heard the statement and Regina gasped. "What?" "Mom, don't go there. It's okay, I'm here." Kathy's sister Mary said, "Hey, sis, didn't see you there." Kathy just stood there with a smile on her face. "Sorry, go for a run. I'll be late for the big sale day at the store." "I heard you got a part-time job at the mall. You go, girl." "I'm thinking of a degree in fashion design, so I thought getting this job would help me when I go to apply to Fit Fashion Institute of Technology." Regina said, "That's not for 2 years." "Well, it's closer than you think, Mom," said her daughter Mary. "I guess we are going to share a room together, Kath?" "What? No, I have my own room." Mary just looked over at her mother. "You did." "Okay, so what is going on here?" "You took my room," said Kathy to her mother. "Yup," Mary said with a big Cheshire cat smile. It's not like hat," Kay High's mother said. "Well, it sure looks like that to me." Kathy made an exasperated statement. "Now don't get upset," Kathy's mother said to her. "I have taken the room as a home office," her mother said. "Yeah, Mom got her real estate license." She is going to be working part-time with Daddy in his office. Mom, are you going to give up nursing? No, Kathy, I am not giving up nursing. I am just trying to help your father. We can discuss this later after you have had some sleep. I have your things in your room, all freshly made up for you. Mary starts to get anxious. Mom, I need to go, putting her hand out for the thermos and giving her mother a kiss goodbye. Okay, dear. Her mother put out her arms for her daughter Mary to fall into them. After Mary took off out the front door, she heard her say, Kath, don't touch my stuff. Kathy said to her younger sister, same goes for you. I already know what you have, and I took what I wanted before you left for college. Kathy thought to herself, that's why I thought I packed certain things that were out there when I opened what I packed at college. So where's the stuff you took from me after I packed to go to college? To her sister. It's in the closet, as Mary walked out the door, before Kathy could ask, okay, but where are you working? Kathy's mother interjected, she is working at G&G's. This is the store Kathy and Mary shopped at when they went to the mall to purchase clothes for the new school year. You should go down and see what they have. You will need some new things. As Kathy's mother handed Kathy her Mad Money credit card. Oh, it's what Kathy's mom called where she deposited the money she made from her work. The three of them used it to make purchases that had nothing to do with paying bills. Bills? Kathy's mother was a very organized person's education. Kathy's father's salary was for the responsibilities of the home and the maintenance of the family. There was more when he worked in New York City. After that catastrophic collision with his car that night and that wall. Regina and her husband agreed he would leave the chaos of the city to come out to Long Island to find new work. He agreed and decided to try his hand at real estate. That was at least 10 years ago. Kathy was only 8 years old. Mary was only 6 years old at the time. Regina knew the next crash would be a fatal one. She was not just referring to only the kinds of crashes that dealt mangled metal on a rainy city highway. The family would have crashed if Regina's husband had not left the city to work on the island. The next time there was an accident, her family might not be so lucky. Regina did not want to take any chances. Regina, where is my lucky golf shirt? Okay, Kathy thought the house was beginning to wake up when Kathy heard her father's voice. She began to feel she was truly blessed to have this family. She had parents who were nurturing to their family and to their relationship. She wanted this for herself when she was ready to have her own family, someday, not now. She was not ready no matter what. The man who she left behind at college said, will you? What? She was taken aback by the sudden question of forever and happily ever after. She couldn't think of happily ever after with anyone until she found out why she was so afraid to even lay her head down at night. She was barely 18 years old. She wanted so much more out of life for herself. Not that her mother was not her hero, but this was her mother's life. This was not her life, not yet. Kathy was young and she was going to have her law career. She still was scared by what happened at school. She came home because it was her safe zone. It was where she would receive her family's positive support. It's hanging in the closet, Regina cried out to her husband. Mom, said Kathy. You see it. Just a minute, Kathy, dear. You found it? She continued to cry out to him. No, her father cried down to her mother. Oh, it's there to open your eyes. She continued to challenge him. Okay, it's here. Regina just waited for him to apologize to his all-knowing wife, but nothing came. She raised her eyebrows. No sooner had he come into the kitchen. After coming calmly down the same staircase Mary, her little sister, had just barreled down a little while ago. He came into the kitchen and pecked her on the lips. I'm sorry, he said. Regina accepted his apology with a big smile and a turn of the head for him to see his eldest daughter staring out at the terrace doors to the pool in their backyard. Going to the large cabinet once more, Regina pulled out another mug. World's Greatest Husband was stamped across the middle of his designated coffee mug. Kathy started to remember when her mother gave her father that mug for his last birthday. She began to smile. She watched her parents and how they communicated in their special way, the way she hoped to communicate with him someday, if they were to even make it that long. Kathy sat at the round table in front of the terrace doors in her thoughts when Her father jilted her out of them when he kissed her lightly on the shoulder, and Kathy shuddered. Her father felt the shudder, and for the smallest moment felt his daughter's uneasiness. "Daddy, the pool looks good," his little girl told her father warmly. But her still could not shake the feeling of the last minute from his young daughter. He thought to himself, should he ask her if something is wrong? But then he thought better of it. He could see she was tired. So, no questions came from his loving embrace to his daughter. "Daddy, the pool looks good," she said as she looked up at her father. Still holding on to her shoulders in a loving embrace. "I'm using a new blue and chlorine works to clean the water and keep its proper pH, daughter. I have been trying to get my clients to use it in their pools too. It makes a big difference when people come to look at the houses that I contract for sale. The people looking to buy are impressed by the idealistic blue water in the pool. It makes it feel like they are in a rich neighborhood." "You mean, Daddy, when you told a couple that the neighborhood they were looking in had domestic help when that girl was leaving a house to go to work at Friendly's, a neighborhood restaurant chain that was popular at that time?" Her father chuckled and gave a warm smile. Well, that uniform looked like he was dressed in a maid's uniform. "So, you just went with it," said his daughter Kathy. "Always use your opportunities, honey," he told his daughter, warmly caressing his daughter's shoulders. "I know, Daddy. I remember what you taught me." Regina leaned over to hand her husband the mug with the Colombian coffee. Reluctantly, she told her husband, "The milk is on the counter next to the sugar, though why you can't drink it black." "I can't. I won't use that pink stuff. 9099900 either. Where are the real sugar cubes?" "Just try it," his wife's voice pleaded to her beloved husband. "Kath, I'm on my way to play golf with the guys before I leave. Do you need help unpacking the car?" "Okay, Daddy, thanks." Kathy tossed her father her keys since her car was blocking her father's car in the driveway. "Dad, I think I am blocking you in." "It's okay, I'll move the car to the side of your mother's car and set your things in the foyer before I leave." Before she could protest, she knew her father wanted to do this. It made him feel like his little girl still was not too big to need him. Her father stood up, kissed his wife Regina, "Have a good day," and reached over to kiss his daughter on the forehead. Kathy reached her hand up to secure that kiss on her forehead, as if it was her mark of security. Her mother, Regina, looked at her daughter and said, "What's wrong?" She was taken by surprise, breaking the connection with the sound of her father putting her things from her car inside the marbled foyer of the front door. "Nothing, Mom." "Okay, I won't get into anything right now. Maybe after you have slept a while, we can talk." As she pressed her cheek lovingly against her daughter's shoulders to show her positive support. After she picked up the dishes from the table and began to place the empty coffee mugs into the dishwasher, to push the button to rinse and hold for the evening's dishes. "Your brothers will be here in a few days." She casually added that fact as she tidied up the kitchen, while her daughter tried to stifle a yawn that escaped out of her mouth anyway. "They are going to have to share a room too because your father took over their bedrooms for his home office." Kathy was feeling the weight of her long, arduous drive creeping up on her. She could barely pay attention to the conversation any longer with her mother. She needed to get some sleep since she had very little before she left college the other evening. He needed to make sure she was not going home to escape from their relationship. Why would she need to escape from a relationship? Her mother never needed to escape from her relationship with her father. If she thought you had to escape from something that was loving, probably she thought the way he was so possessive of her meant that was not the kind of love she was raised to believe in. That when it comes to having a healthy, nurturing relationship. She didn't want to think of all this right now. She just wanted to find a soft place to land and go to sleep for about 24 hours. She got to the top of the landing of the staircase in her family home. A short walk down the hall, and she would open the door to her past, her and her sister's room. They shared it together for more than 8 years while growing up in their parents' home. When Kathy was 16 years old 2 years ago, Kathy's mother and father allowed her to take her oldest brother's, Nick's, old room. That was hard for Kathy's mom because the attic room was her brother Nick's room, until the accident that changed her family forever, especially Kathy's mother, Regina. That attic room, with its high ceiling and large open area, was never used after Nick, Regina's oldest child, died in a car accident while he drove home from college 2 years ago. It was very difficult on Kathy's mom, Regina, to allow her little Peaches and Cream Girl next door Innocent to go far away from her home to school, but to allow her to drive her old clunker station wagon, adding insult to injury. Regina did not do it lightly. It took close to an intervention by her husband and her two remaining sons, Francis and Edmund. It was a hard struggle with Regina's emotions and fears compared to the reality of the situation. Nick's car was hit. Her eldest son, while coming home for the homecoming game at their old high school, Wolverines, the name of the football team her son used to play on. Nick's car was smashed into from behind with a smaller car. The person behind the wheel was later proven to have been drinking. This was every mother's fear. The person who was drinking previous to the accident did not sustain any injuries. That person sits in a jail cell. She believes he got off lightly. He was only charged and arrested. Her son died at the scene. Her lovely, all-American, handsome baby boy Nick was the younger version of his father Bob in every way. This was her little Nicky. She was the only one allowed to call him that. Regina's heart was broken, even though she had 4 more children, and she loved them all dearly. She knew something was not right with her daughter. Kathy saw it in her mother's eyes, but now she was just looking for her soft bed, her pink Barbie comforter, and her pink fuzzy pillow. There they were, when she saw the familiar things that gave her comfort, made her feel like she was actually home, and within minutes, once her head hit the pillow, she fell into a safe, deep sleep for now. Chapter 6. Stephen. He walked into one of the many offices his family owned, inside their many business chains. The one he was given by his father was all the movie theaters scattered throughout the state of Vermont. The only 2 things he liked about Vermont was ice fishing with his buddies and being with her. She was not there anymore. He almost tried to lock her into the theater he had closed so they could talk by themselves. He was playing back in his head while sitting at his desk while opening up his computer. He had been able to hack into Jasmine's computer, her BFF from school. He knew she would email her bestie about her feelings and what she was planning to do. He was nervous because of the strained conversation they had before. She left the theater to go back to her quad at the college to finish packing for the drive home. He begged to go with her, but she was scared to introduce her family to her new boyfriend. "No, my dad is not like your dad. He is very aware of my feelings about the situation, and he will not accept me seeing a 25-year-old. You are 7 years older than me. He will never accept it. I can't live with the look that my father will have on his face after he finds out I am seeing a man who is much older than me." He was, remembering the panic on her face when she tried to explain to him why he could not come with her. He thought, how could her father not want her to have a man who loved her, he told her. This kind of love to her father was more a sort of oppressive love, more like obsession. It was abusive to her father and mother. It was not how Kathy was raised by her parents. Kathy loved the way he took care of her. He was the kind of man who, when she began staying at his condo, that would only allow her to wear the clothes he bought for her. He pulled up the video on the computer. On his large, custom-designed mahogany desk, the screen came to life with a large, spacious closet. It looked to be filled with custom-designed clothes, shoes, and bags. In the corner of that large walk-in, a petite brunette came into focus on the camera, the one hidden in the ceiling. She was removing a large towel off her just-showered body on full display for him. As he watched the video, his thoughts went to that day. All he wanted to do was to touch her. This petite brunette who was pulling the large towel from her flawless porcelain skin. He started thinking, she looks great after I convinced her to start exercising with me. She looked great. He watched her dry off her beautiful flat stomach and put on her matching silk underthings he had purchased in 6 different colors. She wanted the pastel colors, but he picked the copper, gold, silver, magenta, fuchsia, and black silk bras with matching thongs. He had promised that if she agreed to live with him at least 3 days a week, she would have her own suite in his luxurious, spacious condo. That he would not watch her changing her clothes, since he knew she was not open to being watched while she dressed. She trusted him, but he knew he was not to be trusted. He liked that about her. She was innocent and trusting. He was remembering how she was like a lost little lamb. He was there when one of his clients was waiting to collect the money owed to him. His client's roommate said, He should be back soon. Just went to get a keg for the party this Friday. They had these parties, keg parties, to indoctrinate the new freshman crop. Many of the girls were persuaded to become escorts for the men, who came there to purchase products and have other services necessary to complete the experience. You know, we have a lot of college freshmen coming to this keg party. We need to look to see if there are new recruits. You know the drill, buddy. Stephen smirked, knowing full well what this guy was saying to him. So we need a lot more stuff from you than what you usually bring us. Okay, I got you. But I need to be paid for what you have already been given, on credit. No sooner did he make this statement. Outside, he heard the sound of his client's car, a Trans Am. He knew his client had arrived from his errand. So he excused himself from the conversation. He was having to go into the kitchen to get a glass of water. I'm just going to go into the kitchen to get a glass of water, he said as he headed toward the back where the kitchen was located. Once entering the kitchen, he spotted a glass drying on the porcelain-stained edge of the sink. The kitchen was dated at least 20-plus years with appliances that looked like they were more than 10 years old, along with the old Frigidaire. This refrigerator looked like it was from the 1960s, before he was even born. He knew these guys were slugs, but he thought they at least respected how they lived. He thought they were a big source of my income, but they looked like they had no money. Could they even pay him for the product he already delivered? They sometimes brought newbies and sweet young untouched college bunnies to these keg parties. Just as he was thinking this thought, he heard the sweet sounds of one of those sweet young things. He slowly finished the glass of water and he placed it into the stained porcelain sink, to be about as old as his grandparents' time. He heard the girl glancing out to see the sweet young girl with the large brown doe eyes saying, I thought you were going to take me back to my dorm. He could see that the guy was pulling her arm. She was in pain. This girl looked scared, but she also tried to be brave. This girl would have been in big trouble because he knew his friend's way of treating women. His so-called friend had no respect for women. Stephen chimed in, Well, I don't think the lady wants to play right now. He walked confidently into the room, saying it one more time, and then he said, I was just leaving. I can give her a ride back to your college. Little lady, I'm going in that direction. His client, the slime bag Gary, was taken aback when Stephen appeared in the large, dimly lit room. It was dimly lit because the windows were covered from the base of the sill to the ceiling. The covering looked to be like a very heavy black material. He knew this was not the place for this kind of girl to be, an innocent. She didn't know what kind of sleazy trap she had walked into, he thought. Stephen's friend took a hard stance. No, man, I told her. I would take her back after we spent time together, just the two of us. Stephen said, Well, she looks to be outnumbered. He took a look at the situation. Again, he spoke up. The lady does not look like she wants to stay. Stephen gave the guy, his sleazy client, a look that could kill. This backed the guy down, while gently moving in position between the slime ball abuser and the innocent doe-eyed brunette. He swiftly took her hand in his to lead them out of the room to his car. Just walk with me, he said to her in a soft voice. He knew now was not the time for showing aggression. This was his client, and she was hopefully not going to cost him a great loss of business. But right now, for some reason, he did not care. This was not usually his character to get himself involved in his client's personal business. He didn't know why the sweet, innocent freshman with the doe eyes was tugging at his heartstrings, winning over his purse strings, not usually his way. He walked her out to his car and went around to the other side to open the door. He gently lowered her into the black leather seat of his black Porsche Carrera. Can I trust you? Component placement. Are you going to take me to my college, to my dorm? Zrenier, the guy that just rescued her, said, Do you believe I won't take you to your dorm room? I do not know what to believe. I believe and trust that God will take care of me. Well, that's great. Who is to say that I'm not the person to answer your prayers? So, she asked again, but a different, more adamant way, since she had received a clear answer from him. So, you are taking me back to my dorm, right? With a smiling gesture like she was pleading to be a better person, he paused a minute before saying, I don't have a better side. I'm not good, and you are too innocent for me, little girl. However, my mother raised her son right. Still, she waited for his answer, and it came. So where's your mother now? Do you see her often? His words had been stolen out of his mouth by the innocent brunette with the doe eyes, catching the experienced businessman who had an answer and angle for every situation. He needed to get this one out of life and out of his car as soon as possible. She was beginning to have an effect on his senses in a way he did not want to be affected. Oh, in a way nothing has affected him in so many lonely years since he lost his mother and little brother Cam. For many years now, it has been only him and his father, Jason Rutherford. Well, really, only him and Jason Rutherford's 4 trophy wives who tried to be substitute mothers. They were poor replacements as far as Stephen was concerned. They were just a bottomless pit of expensive distractions for his wealthy father, Jason Rutherford. Even though a state like Vermont was as far removed from where the action was, hardly a Masters of the Universe territory, Jason Rutherford had a very long reach and was very influential in the halls of democracy, Washington, D.C. His father often traveled back and forth from his hometown of Burlington, Vermont, to the moves and shakers of Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Stephen never really had anything in his life after he was age 12. This was the year he had lost his mother and little brother Cam. He and his father could not face surviving as just father and son. The son part was just an inconvenience. He knew he should just pull up to her dorm, stop at the curb, and open the passenger side door to let her out of his car and out of his life. But as he was pulling up to the curb, he noticed how she reacted. He pulled his car up to the small building of the all-girls school, Unity College. He began to tell her, home safe and sound. Something happened. He began to feel something for the strange girl. While watching her relax, she finally released her hand off the seatbelt she had been grasping, so tightly it gave her white knuckles. The blood began to come back into her fingers, and she breathed a sigh of relief to see he had kept his word. He leaned over and gently touched her hand to make her feel more at ease. It's okay. One moment he was comforting her, and the next minute he was looking into those wonderful, innocent doe eyes. They were engulfing him. He couldn't look away when all of a sudden, without any warning, she reached up her lips to kiss him. They stayed in that kiss looker than he expected, taking him by surprise. The girl was more than what he expected. Still innocent, but now he saw something amazingly seductive about her innocence. She released the kiss and quietly said, "Thank you." He said, "No problem, another life and time, maybe." So she reached over and kissed him again, her lips touching his so ever gently. The spark was ignited, and he wanted more of her sweetness to affect his hard shell. However, he was totally unaware of this. It would be later that it would hit him, and it would be too late. He needed to be a nice guy, but he found himself moving into the kiss. Now they were not only touching, but they were tasting each other's touch. He slowly, with trepidation, opened his mouth to her, pulling her body into his while adding more effort and seduction into the kiss. This one grabbed onto both of them. There was definitely chemistry between the two strangers. The two travelers met to save each other. He didn't realize this until he let her keep on kissing him. Chapter 7. Stephen Rutherford pulled himself out of his thoughts. He had been sitting in his favorite leather chair, not realizing he had been too lost in his thoughts of Kathy. He suddenly noticed the blinking red light on his phone. He thought, "I have a message." He picked up the receiver, pushed the button to hear the incoming call. It was a call from her. "Just wanted to let you know I got to my family's home safely. I also wanted to remind you that you promised me you would stay away." He thought, I promised her. I should not have made that promise to him. He pushed the button again and again, just to hear her sweet, soothing voice. He missed hearing that voice. He especially listened to it when he wanted to fall asleep. Just hearing her calming voice helped him sleep undisturbed by his past demons. They tended to show up when he needed peace from his haunting past. He never could process what happened to his mother, no matter how many therapy sessions he attended with the good doctor. He wanted her to come back to him instead of her being a daddy's girl, to be his sexy little kitten. He pushed another button on the computer in front of him on his desk. He brought up yet another video of her. This one showed a young and innocent Kathy laid out on her bed, the one in her suite in his condo. This was how he managed to get her to agree to stay with him. She would only agree if she had her own room at first. He was more than okay with this because of his parasomnia. That was a fancy word for acting out your night terrors. He was afraid he might hurt her. In the video he was watching, she was doing what he had taught her to do, pleasuring herself. He said he would not try to touch her or sleep with her until she could feel the sensations necessary to release her sexual frustrations. He had told her how to pleasure herself, when she needed to touch herself, and how much pressure to use to touch the area that would give her a heightened sexual sensation. He watched her on the video. She began to squirm and wriggle as she lay on that beautiful California king bed, adorned with the silk sheets. As they bunched up under her flirtatious movements, he was getting excited watching her and how she enjoyed her own sexuality. She had no idea of her secret admirer watching her, on the camera facing over the bed. The camera was directly above her bed in the shimmery, delicate crystals of the chandelier. He needed to feel her. All over, as he watched, he began to twitch and made himself join in while watching the video. He could not stand it. It was then he decided it was time for her to come back home to him. He had received sexual services from many different females of his past, but Kathy had a way of giving the experience as if she was by her own hand, getting pure joy out of the sexual act more than him. She submitted to sex like a fish to water. She was secretly a siren. Kathy was the perfect candidate for being a submissive. Her song was all he needed to hear, and he could get hard just by thinking about what he would be doing to her. Again, sooner than later. He keeps recalling that at first it took some gentle coaxing. This was because she was afraid of the sexual act. Something had happened to her as a young girl, or someone happened to her as a young girl. It took away her beauty and her luminosity for enjoying her own sexuality. Someone had already stolen her sexuality, but since she was so young, it was more like they stole her innocence. He had learned of this because of the night he observed her dream therapy session with the good doctor, Werner, his therapist and past professor at UVM when he attended years ago. She still doesn't know that he knows about the incident that happened to her when he observed Kathy in the recording of her REM sleep in her sleep session. She was left alone with a family member. It was not something she needed to worry about anymore because it was a long time ago. But there was a third person, was still out there, a depraved monster, living in the same neighborhood as the Fitzpatrick family. It was years ago, but she was home. Now hopefully he was gone, moved away. She never told anyone because she had no memory of the assaults, but he knew it still had a profound effect on her lack of self-esteem. He would never let her know that he knew. She would feel so embarrassed and ashamed. He knew it would affect their lovemaking. Nothing he did or said would encourage her to be strong, to tell her it didn't matter to him. He just wanted her to come back. He did not know how long he could go on like this. Without her at his side, he knew he was not the same person without her. He could not see going back to who he was before she had become part of his life's blood, running through his veins. He had to tell her something about his business. This made him fear losing her, but it had to be done. He begins to think of what happened. One night, Kathy walked in on a situation with one of his female clients, Daphne. Kathy had assumed something else. This woman, Daphne, was the type that had to give me a kiss goodbye for old time's sake. Yes, we were together once, said Stephen to Kathy, but it was not a good situation for either of us. He continued on to explain the awkwardness of the scene Kathy walked in on. He continued to tell her the story. Daphne was one of my mother's best friends. She consoled me when I was going through a difficult time. I was only 17 years old. It was a low time in my life, and she was there for me. I did not really understand what she was doing to me, but once I was aware of it, it was too late for me to change it. She was in a bad way, with her husband, and I needed someone who knew my other. She claimed to love me, but she was just my sick addiction. She was close to my mother, as I said, and it became a game of who could hurt the other one more. So our loneliness found a common factor for codependency, like a habit, a bad one, like an addict. We were both sick and broken. She took advantage of that, but I met you and Daphne knew it was the end of the two of us. I had never really been with anyone sexually, but this older woman taught me everything. It was then that he was the one to submit to her orders. She punished me and taught me how to punish back, to become a dominant. She was abusive to me, to the extreme, and I, to her. Stephen stood and decided to end the video on his computer. Closing down his computer, he stretched, stood to his full 6'3" height with his rock-hard abs. He needed to distract his mind for a while, so he grabbed his workout bag, the one he kept ready and under his desk. Running his hands through his light brown locks, Kathy did that, pulling at his hair to make him less anxious. He had dark, stormy gray eyes that enhanced his beautiful face. He opened the door to the building where his office was inside the movie theater, located on State Street. This was the building near the health club his family also owned. It's where he worked out. To get rid of his frustrations, he truly was frustrated without her and needed to keep motivated. Exercise, some kickboxing would help along those lines. It was still light out when he walked out of the building to his black Porsche Carrera, got in, and the engine began to roar to life. Kathy loved how he looked in his sexy sports car. She gave him a special gift for his car, a vanity license plate. She had made for his birthday Cat's Guy. He had recently got that license plate for him through the Sharper Image catalog. It was just a novelty item she thought he would get a kick out of, but he went out and made it the official license plate for his car. The state only required that a car have one plate on the back bumper, but he wanted the plate she bought him to be the one wanted, officially. He put the car in drive and headed out of the parking lot to the health club at the end of the same street. The family owned most of the commercial space along this street, State Street. Stephen's family was powerful and well-connected, like a father like son. Chapter 8. Kathy. Later in the day, Kathy finally woke up from her much-needed sleep. It was a much-needed rest after her long 8-hour drive all the way from Vermont, up near the Canadian border. She left him a message in the early morning after arriving at her family home on Long Island, NY. As soon as her car pulled into her parents' driveway, she texted him, left a message to say she was okay for now. She wanted to call him again, but that would have been wrong, to lead him into a false feeling of security, since she did not know what she was going to do yet. She needed first to unpack her suitcases. Then she wanted to jump into a cool shower. To refresh herself getting in the shower, she could not help thinking about him, the things he did to her, how he showed her how to do to herself. These things made her have exploding sensations throughout her body, even now. She looked down, realizing what her hand had been doing. She was stroking the same sensual areas he had taught her to stroke, areas that made her implode into multitudes of electrically charged fragments of herself. The things he did to her, she wanted to feel only by him. Only him, no one else. He was her world. It had only been one day, the sun had not even set. How would she make it through another day, let alone 3 more months? She needed him, but she knew her need for him was not a healthy one. At least, it was not healthy for how she was raised. Her mother and father did not own each other. They could survive without the other one. They could get through a normal day without needing to touch each other. This was not what Kathy wanted in a relationship. She wanted his touch to brand her like a burning iron to the heart. She did not care what her parents had. It was great for them, but it was not passionate enough for her. Why was she now dependent on a man after all this time in her life? She never needed a man to complete her, but this was not any man. This was her man. She ate, breathed, and slept, his existence in her very core, and she hoped vice versa too. She did not know where she ended, and he began. This obsessive behavior was bad for her. She needed to kick this terrible habit. Just like smoking, she did not want to stop, but at least this kind of habit only hurt the lungs. Her habit hurt the heart, too. She couldn't have even a thought without him bringing in the mix. She thought, oh, what would he say about this? What would he say about that? Not, who cares? What he thinks about what I do? This is my life. He doesn't own me. He doesn't begin my day or end my day. Oh, God, how do I do this? Please help me. Let go of him. She grabbed a towel from the rack in the ensuite bathroom her sister and her shared together. She took a good sniff of the towel. It smelled like the stuff her mother used when she was little. She made everything smell like lavender. Her mother made everything so soft and fresh-smelling. She took the other smaller towel from the same set and dried her long chestnut brown hair. Stephen said it looked more like rich, dark chocolate. He wanted to just eat me up from head to toe. Just thinking about those things brought a shiver to her spine. She had to shake this man out of her hair. She took the blow dryer out of the lower cabinet under the vanity in the bathroom. She first had to make sure there was no water on the floor before plugging it in to the outlet above the mirror, over the sink, to dry her hair. She flipped her head over, getting a rush of blood, while drying her hair from the root to the crown. This was the way to make sure for her hair was thoroughly dry. She was toying with the idea of applying to cosmetology school, possibly as an alternative to heading back to her college after the end of her summer break. After making sure her hair was dry, she wrapped the cord around the blow dryer to put it away where it was before she used it. She then took out the flat iron to straighten her long brown hair. He said he liked it straight. It was just like a rich flowing waterfall. She just likes it straightened, so it would look polished. Right now, she was not going anywhere, but downstairs, however, she always liked to look nice anyway. After drying and straightening her hair, next she pulled out her sweats from the chest of drawers. In the corner, these sweats were the ones with the college logo on it, Unity Girls College, the name of the school she attended. She loved these sweats. Not only were they soft and comfortable, but they were her favorite color, stormy gray, the color of his eyes. They were comfortable because the top had a small cap sleeve. The pants were yoga style, flared at the bottom, and the material was that new soft light cotton. The sigh where she went to a veg outfit when she just wanted to hang out and relax with her thoughts. It was good that they went to the feet and the shirt had a cap sleeve. She had a sleeveless tank, but her mother kept the house at only 58 degrees. In the summer, the air conditioning was her mother's domain. Her mother did not like the sweltering outside heat of late June. Nothing like what July will be, at least 10 degrees hotter. So, Regina, Kathy's mother, kept it colder inside than outside. Kathy hated any kind of AC, so she grabbed her computer and headed down the stairs to the backyard deck overlooking the lush green lawn crowning the new swimming pool, her father's favorite pastime. He kept that pool beautiful and blue. Before she left the room to go outside, she made sure everything was picked up, neat and tidy. Kathy was a little OCD. This is what made Kathy's sister beg her parents for a room of her own. Kathy liked things neat and tidy, while Mary left everything out. Kathy's environment had to be clean, and nothing could be left out of place. Mary was just the opposite, leaving everything on the floor where she dropped it, dressing to go to work that very morning. Kathy didn't miss the hamper the way Mary always did. Her nightshirt was thrown on the floor. So Kathy picked up Mary's nightshirt and other things and folded them up, put them in her drawer. On second thought, Kathy decided this is what caused the problems between the two sisters, so Kathy opened the drawer, took out the folded nightshirt, unfolded it, and threw it to the floor before closing the door on her way out of the room. Kathy found herself sitting on the deck chair on the red-stained cedar deck, just gazing at the beautiful blue water. Her thoughts began to wander as she wrote an email to her BFF Jasmine back at school. Just write a quick email to your BFF. How is he? Chapter 9. Jasmine didn't leave Vermont for the summer. She had to stay at school with the other foreign exchange students. Jasmine, who was just coming back from the gym, stopped at a package store to buy a large ham and Swiss hoagie. This place, the corner package store, was famous for them. All the college kids in the college town ate them at all different times of the day and night. They were the go-to meal, easy and quick, very little work. Everybody knew college students didn't like to work more than they had to. Jasmine especially liked things quick and easy, taking a bite. The red-headed, green-eyed, beauty with her unusual style. The reason for this was that she was of an unusual pedigree. Half Egyptian and half Armenian, about the same height as Kathy, her best friend, about all they had in common. They were as different as two girls from two different cultures. It was this fact that gave them their interest in becoming friends. Kathy loved to learn about people from different cultures and worlds. Jasmine thought about it as she savored the hot mustard between the sharp taste of the meat and cheese. Yeah, everybody loved them, but Kathy, she didn't eat any kind of bread. She was very weight conscious. Jasmine remembered a time when Stephen wanted to see for himself how much influence he had over her. So he made a whole loaf of garlic bread. He made her eat it. By turning the act into some sort of seduction, he was good when it came to that. Any girl would have eaten whatever he put in their mouth. A sudden smile came to Jasmine's face, thinking, why not me? Why her? Was this Kathy's best friend? Kathy knew secretly Jasmine wanted to be with Stephen, but Stephen was not interested in anyone but Kathy, obsessively so. So Jasmine kept wandering back to the day Kathy was seduced. Italian garlic bread was a very sensuous food. It was especially true the way Stephen presented it to her and then ate it oozing with melted butter in front of her. He could make Kathy do anything, and he did. They had fun with each other. Everybody could see how much Kathy loved him. Jasmine was not happy with Stephen's mesmerizing routine with her best friend Kathy. She was concerned with the effect he had on her. Jasmine was determined to do something about it. Or was it just jealousy? Kathy was finally getting attention from a man like Stephen he was, one of the most eligible bachelors in that college town, and his sights were on Kathy. Jasmine believed her best friend was not thinking with her own free will. This bothered Jasmine, but she only wanted Kathy to be happy. Unfortunately, she thought, did it have to be Stephen that made Kathy happy? Jasmine needed to think about this in a serious way. Jasmine felt that Kathy was not the same as she was when they first met in school as quad mates. That day was filled with introductions to new people, which would take center stage in Kathy's life. Her and her 3 new friends from other lands, Jasmine from France via Egyptian province, and the other 2, and Kathy. The 4 were good together, inseparable until Stephen. Kathy was now Stephen's muse, his inspiration. The other 3 saw it. It was clear to all. Jasmine was not going to continue to allow this, not on her watch. She had to show Kathy that Stephen was no good for her. Jasmine started to respond back to the email she received from Stephen Rutherford, Kathy's obsessive boyfriend and lover. The email read, "Have you had dinner yet?" Jasmine read the words more than once, hesitating. She eyed the email and she eyed the unwrapped, half-eaten hoagie. It took just a minute, less once she decided what to do, wrapping the hoagie back up into the cellophane wrapping, opening the refrigerator. The girls had in the room she shared with another girl in the dorm of the college. They all attended together, the 4 friends. Jasmine had a pain of betrayal to her BFF, Kathy. Not before placing the sandwich on the shelf for later and pushing the send button. Her email response to Stephen read, she slyly said, "No, not eaten yet, have you?" Jasmine began to read the rest of the email, just thinking, how could she do this to her best friend? Well, she rationalized, she did tell me to take care of him, so she answered, "No, I have not eaten yet." Jasmine pushed the send button waiting for a response, and the response came within a few minutes. This is what he was waiting for. He knew she, Kathy's girlfriend, BFF, my ASS, as soon as she answered his email response to Jasmine. "Okay, get dressed. I'm coming by to take you out to eat." So Jasmine ran to get ready. She did not have to be asked twice. He opened his eyes to find it was Kathy singing to him the song, "This Little Lamb," in the most beautiful voice of an angel. She looked down at his tortured face with her big brown soulful eyes. They were like pieces of his favorite dark chocolate. He just fell into those deep brown eyes, listening to her say to him, "Are you okay?" He did not say a word. He just grabbed onto her and pulled her down into his bed in a loving, caring, supportive embrace and kissed her, which sucked the breath out of her. He stopped long enough to look up at her with his stormy gray eyes. She knew there was a lot hidden behind them. She, right now, did not care. She just did not want his embrace to end. There would be time, she thought, to find out more as to why he was screaming out in his sleep, what he was so terrified about, or who he was so terrified about. He saw what he needed to hear, her face looking back at him, with a wide grin from ear to ear. He knew then it was okay to kiss her again and go further than he had before that night. He kissed her deeper, so deep she gasped. The kiss she could feel down to her beautiful milky white thighs and through to the farther reaches of her soul. From that vantage point, he began to kiss her thighs and went inward with his tongue. This time, she yelped out a scream of ecstasy and heat that he ventured yet a little bit farther, constantly looking at her to see that she was still, happy with her choices. He did not want to scare her off, not now. She had shown him pure love, and he wanted to do the same for her. He kept on kissing her tender, milky white skin, down her legs, to her feet, and up again, to her thighs, over and over as she lay there in his secure embrace. She was feeling pretty much in a blissful, euphoric state. He knew she had never done this before him. He was trying to show her how to pleasure herself for 2 months now, he believed. The training period was over. It was time to see if she had learned anything. He did this because he wanted her to be comfortable and secure when he finally did these things to her. He did not want her to feel dirty, either because this was pure and natural between 2 consenting adults. It at first was like teaching a child to walk, but he would brave the baby steps. Because he already knew what she would feel, at least, he hoped, when she finally started to run on her own. So he continued his southerly exploration of the bottom half of her lovely body. The body he had, a hand in sculpting, made him even happier. This was his pure masterpiece, her beautiful body. In his embrace, making love to her throughout the night, a night that started in torture and agony, for him, would end in passion. He gave her little butterfly kisses before he left the bed, not wanting to repeat the earlier part of that tortuous night. It was time to try to move on with her, Kathy, his muse, his very lifeline. He remembered, as he shut the door to the other suite, how she tasted, and how he first started to caress her feminine folds in between her thighs. With the soft pat of his finger, she was still enjoying his gentle invasion of her body. He was getting closer to his target. Now remember what I taught you to do to yourself. She just nodded her head up and down. It was all she had the strength to do. He pictured her in his mind's eye. The simple way she obeyed his every command as her body moved to the rhythm of his talented fingers, tongue, and anything else he felt would do the trick. He shuddered, remembering that moment. He thought it would just be something for her to experience for the first time, but he was also experiencing new things for the first time. Kathy was a wonder in his eyes. He waited for her to respond physically to his touch before he went further. He fell asleep finally with the beautiful picture of her under him. He heard her little kitten voice. Okay, he thought the sound of her voice was so clear. He turned to find her, brushing against him. There she was in his room, requesting he let her sleep with him. He was reluctant, but he lifted the comforter to let her slip in. Just for tonight, he admonished. She nodded in agreement. He began to place the soft pad of his little finger and press down on the spot right above the opening to her vagina. He first made small circles, with little pressure. As the circles got bigger, he applied a little more pressure. Kathy was pulsating now, pushing her pelvis up and down to the rhythm of his fingers. Then he began to run his finger, on the other hand, lightly around the rim of the inner sanctum, still with the right amount of pressure, he said, softly, as if a seductive whisper, like he was telling her a dirty little secret. Are you ready? I'm going to put my finger just one at a time inside you, baby. There was a jolt, as if she were struck by a bolt of electricity. She was moving her body to his movements, and they were doing their own seductive dance. She just whispered back to him, "Okay there, touch me there." Her body went wild like an earthquake was inside her, making her tremble all over. She was looking into his beautiful eyes, while biting her lower lip. This made him rock hard, and he was so enticed, he ran up her body, kissing all along the way, first her feminine openings, as if a special pathway, then her hip sockets, her lower abs, middle of the small crevice. In her stomach, he ran his tongue around the rim of her belly button, heading to the abundance of her smooth, erect her, making and caressing her neck. Finally, he arrived at her sultry, sexy, puffy, full lips, erupting with blood. Because she was biting down so hard, she caused her lips to bleed. He invited himself to grab her lip with his open mouth, sucking the breath out of her. She gasped. Please, Stephen, she was getting frustrated with his dangling promise. She wanted him inside her now. He stopped sucking her tongue long enough to smile and say, "Now you are ready for me." First, he took his fingers out and traced her inner thigh ever so lightly. The feeling was becoming torturous to her. She started to whine and whimper for him to come inside her and fill her up with every fiber of his strength. He just smiled at her while he came down, real hard, thrusting over and over. She was wrung out after her, making he had put her through. he said, panting and pouring sweat all over her breasts. "Do you want me to stop, Kathy? Are you okay? Do you want more? Or do you want to rest?" She just tossed her head, side to side. This was the nod to advance. She could barely talk. Her energy was depleted, but she was so happy. He looked up at her beautiful, sleepy, sated eyes. All he saw was his future. It was the night he solidified their passion for each other, and there would be many nights like this to come. She wanted to keep going, and he wanted to give her more if she could handle it. He was in awe of her stamina. A novice to this. She was keeping up with him and thrusting, keeping a rhythm to his tongue and finger play. "Go on, baby. You earned it. Come for me, baby. Come on, oh, baby, you are so wet for me. Will you be this way for me always?" He shoved his tongue in deeper and deeper, and she began to scream. "Go ahead, scream, baby. No one else around to hear us. Scream your lungs out. It's okay with me, scream. Let it out. Don't hold back." He came up to her lips. They were swelled and puffed from all the kisses, over and over, feeling her tears and caressing and kissing them as they rolled down her beautiful cheeks. "That was great, baby. You did great." Stephen laid back to work to get himself off. He felt she had had enough for one night. He was still hard. Kathy was still feeling the sexual sensation. It might have been the adrenaline, but she turned toward him. With a grin across her beautiful face, she got down on the floor and took his engorged shaft. At first, just the tip would touch her perfect, rosy, innocent lips, but he watched while she decided to take him in further. She watched his reaction to her spirit of adventure to pleasure him, and it was by the physical reaction from his body. She was working it like a seasoned siren, singing on his key, pleasuring her man. Although this, her first attempt at giving a BJ, and if there was a category for it, in the Olympics, he would give her the gold. He was getting so excited by her enthusiasm, he pulled her in for another round. So while she sucked on him, he flipped her over so that he could continue pleasuring her. The two of them were in a perfect 69 euphoric formation. This went on for a number of hours. They took their foreplay into the four-person Swiss glass-enclosed shower. He backed her up against the glass and began to caress and lick her up and down her sculpted body with a salacious grin on his face. Finally, exhausted from all the acrobatic lovemaking and the heat of the sauna, they collapsed into each other's arms while allowing the hot spray of the shower to relax them from head to toe. They stood naked under the spray of the steaming hot Swiss shower jets until he moved them into the jacuzzi so they could soak their exhausted bodies. "That was amazing," he said, while she just nodded her head, unable to speak for lack of energy. She was practically numb, but still, her body tingled like an electric current was still flowing through every fiber to her soul. She gave him the most innocent and sweetest kiss. "Thank you." He said, "No thank you," as he pulled her in and kissed her on her sweat-soaked forehead. They both knew, holding each other, this would not be the last time but the first time of many more. Amazing nights caressing and tasting each other as if no one else existed. As she fell asleep in his arms, he promised it would only get better. Chapter 10. Stephen waited for the email response from Jasmine. As soon as he saw it, he knew Kathy was trusting the wrong person. He held his breath while he waited on her response. It came. Hooking up his other computer so his genius hacker friend could connect the device, so each keystroke she made was cloned onto Stephen's other computer. This would give Stephen the exact duplicate emails Jasmine sent out. Stephen was able to know every communication between Kathy and Jasmine as soon as they were made. His friend was a state-of-the-art hacker, could hack into anything. He stood there while his friend, Poindexter, attained every keystroke that Jasmine made on her computer. It gave the hacker enough information to help Stephen to always be one step ahead, to know everything the girls were writing to each other at all times. He thought, wouldn't Kathy love to know her best friend is lusting after her boyfriend? Stephen said to himself, "Don't worry, Kath, you belong to me and I belong to you." He just needed to get into her email. So, with every keystroke, Stephen's genius friend who could hack anything in no time had her email. Stephen would know everything now as soon as Kathy sent her friend Jasmine an email. He thought it should not be too long now. Kathy would reach out soon to her friend to get an update on what was happening while she was not around. Kathy sat down on the big, comfy red chaise that was just outside on the deck, overlooking the family pool. She gazed at the pool, hoping her father would do a pH test on the pool so they would be able to jump into it. Just at that moment, like her mother was reading her mind. Regina came out onto the porch. Really a cedar deck they had put in a little less than 3 years ago. This was a badge of honor for her father, installing this deck on his own. He was not really the handyman type, but he tried his best when he had the time. This was one of those times he wanted to do this job for his wife, Regina. She did so much for her family. He appreciated all she did. Her mother said in a cheeky way, "I wanted him to put up an atrium so we could enclose the space with the deck, but something about it becoming living space and that our taxes would go through the roof." He was right. I checked with the building department. Kathy just smiled. At her mother, Kathy admired how her mother had it all together. "Mom, you always have everything put together." "Daddy, does he even know?" Her mother just waved her off with a sweeping hand gesture. Then Kathy heard the small sigh in her mother's voice. No, not really a voice. It was more like an exasperated breath. She knew it was coming, but she was not ready to make any grand confessions or to be on her mother's psych couch. The lounge chaise was a bit like a large couch in a psychologist's therapy office, as Kathy looked down with her eyes rolling back in her head, giving her mother a stern look. "The doctor is in," cried Kathy to her mother. "Okay, enough wisecracks, young lady," said Kathy's mom. Kathy sheepishly answered back, "Okay, Mom, can we just sit here and say nothing? Can we just enjoy the solitude?" Kathy was now pleading with her mother. "Sure," Kathy's mom relented, "but you know." Kathy finished the sentence before her mother got a chance to, "You know where I am when you need me, baby." "I know," said Kathy. "Well, you do know I only want the best for you, your sister and brothers." Kathy's mom began to get all emotional. Kathy brought her arms around her mother's neck. "I know, Mom, please, don't cry." "I know." Kathy knew that every time her mother said this about how she loved to protect her children, she was also including the one that was lost. Regina, feeling sad about Nick, Kathy's oldest brother who was lost in a freak accident several years ago. It shattered her family, especially her mother. This made Kathy think about Stephen and his lost family members. He was lost without her. He would tell her all the time, but she needed to deal with whatever she was dealing with alone. This was no more apparent to her than the night after he woke out of a fitful night's sleep. He was yelling a woman's name. At first, Kathy was jealous, but he continued on with his rant. "Mom, please don't leave me. I need you. You and Cam are my family." Kathy knew of Stephen's father. She had even met him once. In passing, he practically didn't notice her presence. She was standing less than 10 feet away from him. Jason Rutherford. Kathy, had some internet research on Jason Rutherford. She wanted to know what made him so important. Stephen made her think he was such a big deal, and he was not kidding. The man's accomplishments filled up hundreds of sites, including anything to do with flying airplanes, government contracts, developing high-end 5-star hotels and resorts. She was a little intimidated, but just a little. Nothing, she looked and found, mentioned Stephen's mother or his brother Cam. He told her that his father made sure nobody planted any information concerning the loss of Stephen's mother and little brother Cam. Stephen's father wanted to keep his private life private, especially for his remaining child. Stephen was curious and has been for more than 14 years, still wants to look into the strange happenings of his mother and brother's suspicious accident. She, Kathy, knows that Stephen has other brothers and sisters, but he never gives them a single thought. Since he was the oldest firstborn son to his first real wife, they would all be taken care of, Stephen's father assured him, but "You will always be my firstborn? I will leave everything I built to you, son." Stephen knew Jason Rutherford, his father, was one thing if, nothing else, he was a man of his word. Stephen knew his father meant it, unless Stephen did something to lose face in his father's eyes. Chapter 11. Kathy had just finished sending an email to Jasmine a few minutes before her mother, Regina, came out onto the back deck. She wrote, "Jasmine, BFF. How are you doing, girlfriend? What's it like there with nobody left except the ones who couldn't travel to other countries? Kathy, your BFF. Respond. It would only be 3 months before the new fall semester starts, and everyone would be back, thought Kathy. Of course, she was not sure about her coming back, but she had no decision as yet. But she did not want to mention it in the email. A lot of the foreign exchange students who went to the little private all-girls college were from very important, affluent families that wanted to send their daughters to school in the United States of America. The three, who were Kathy's friends, were inseparable. Allie, who was from Paris, France, was considered Parisian. Wow, Kathy thought. After talking to Allie, short for Alicia, she wanted so much to go to Paris at least once in her lifetime. Philly was short for Phyllis Van Harrington III. Her father, a British diplomat, wanted a boy at first, but grew into having a daughter. She was of Welsh descent, with curly red hair and blue eyes. Her father's side was of Scandinavian lineage, probably Philly thought a million years ago, or at least centuries. A Viking clan and a Welsh clan centuries ago. Those two were never allowed to mix pedigrees. Her BFF, Jasmine, was half Egyptian and half Armenian, Ben and Tutu. She would always say if she didn't go away to college, her father would surely indoctrinate her as a terrorist, the way she was murdering his bottom line with her credit card, the one he gave her with unlimited access. Kathy wrote further to Jasmine, "Did he send you an email yet? This was to find out if you have been writing to me or talking to me." Again, Kathy wrote, "Well, let me know because you know how I miss him. You also know he is a catch in that town. Every girl would have loved to have gotten with Stephen Rutherford, eligible, sexy, smooth, and filthy rich." The rich part was not important to Kathy. He was still, she thought, just as broken as she was. This is why she knew two broken people could not put each other back together again. No matter if there were king's horses and king's men, it just couldn't work. She knew this. She just had to get him to know this. She also had to convince her heart, too. Right now, her heart and her head are not speaking to each other for the foreseeable future. They definitely were not speaking to her either. They were very mad at her, too. She needed to make up her mind so her heart could finally heal and move on. The heart needed a safe haven, or her life would always be as crazy as the Queen of Hearts, who all she wanted to do was cut off their heads. Kathy loved Alice in Wonderland, one of her favorite literary characters. Kathy had always wanted to disappear down a rabbit hole, but reality was just too real. Her fantasy world, growing up, after the experience, kept her grounded. She could escape from herself. She loved reading, the only one in the Fitzpatrick family who did. The rest of them were all into nothing but sports. Francis, her older brother, was a talented artist. Kathy knew he would use it someday to follow his dreams, but Kathy was not going there. She always felt like a black sheep amongst all the talents and abilities of others. Kathy sat there, now finished with writing the email. She wanted to read it over before sending it out. She finished reading it and decided to sign it. "Your loving, grateful, and trusting friend. BFFs forever." Wow, laying it on thick, are we? She was reading over Kathy's shoulder. Her sister Mary had come into the backyard while coming from work. Kathy quickly closed the laptop that was resting. Where else on her lap? It was actually on a special board. Because laptops got really hot, and some studies show it could get hot enough to burn someone's skin. Stephen purchased this special laptop for Kathy, with this special board attached, sort of like a kickstand. This special added board allowed the laptop to be raised up, so it would not lay flat, not to have a chance of burning her skin. Kathy did not know that the laptop was a special device, a prototype his father was working on for his friends at the Pentagon. It was going to be called an HP device for special communications, so it put out a signal not detectable by those that they did not want to detect. It was still not available for public sale, hopefully never would be. It also had a camera built into it. It was the size of a thumbnail. When it was opened, he could see her, but she could not see him. She did not have any idea there was a camera in her laptop. Her sister Mary said, "All right, Kath, I know you won't talk to Mom and Dad, but this is me, and I know there is something wrong, something you are not telling me." From what I just read, On that board thingy, it has to do with a guy. Her sister, who had always been this way, picked up things fast. She was so astute, as well as nosy. No, really, Kathy loved her little sister, but it was something she would not discuss with her. She was 2 years younger and did not need these kinds of weighty problems on her young shoulders. She did not need to have ideas about an obsessive, oppressive, sexy, out-of-this-world, totally all-male. That is what he was to Kathy. No one needed to understand, and this family never could, so she kept her secret, love. Her secret. He told her to hurry back and there would be so much more to experience for her. Mary, Kathy's little sister, there was no mistaking. She was beautiful. She was definitely a heartbreaker. She had a steady guy. He had been buzzing around her since she was 14 years old, now 16. He was really serious about her. She was serious for him too. The family loved him like an extension of the family already. Kathy wondered if her family would or even could think of Stephen that way with her. Mary's David was a whiz when it came to math. It was both their love of numbers that brought them together when they first met in Mr. Clausen's 9th grade math class. This is what Mary excelled at, other than every sport a woman could play. She was now 16 years old, but she looked more like she was 20. It was something she needed to watch out for her sister. If she was getting too old too fast. She knew she was not ready for the world. Especially now that Kathy had been out there. The little she saw, the more she knew. She had to help to educate and protect her baby sister, and she definitely would try. But Kathy knew better, now that you cannot shield anyone from anything, but she would try to give her knowledge that would give her power to handle whatever came about. Kathy told Mary what could have happened to her up at school, with the house behind the college, in the woods, and what went on there, or what could have happened to her if not for the guy that saved her. It still in the back of Kathy's mind bothered her. What was he doing there? But she just decided it was her faith, and God had a hand in it. So she didn't question God's way, not anymore, at least not lately. No matter how she rationalized it, why did he just so happen to be in that dilapidated shack out in a wooded area a few miles from her school? After she got back to school the very next day, she reported the whole incident sans Stephen to the campus security. They did not need to know about the knight in shining armor that saved her. They, in particular, the captain of the campus security, told her these keg parties were lures for the college freshmen. He stated, "The innocent, who are fresh meat to kill." They, the captain especially, were grateful to Kathy for reporting it and coming forward. They said to her, not too many would take the chance. She shuddered a little, just remembering the conversation she had with the captain of the campus security. But she soon understood what the captain had been telling her. Soon after reporting it, she was threatened and harassed. Her car was broken into. They poured gasoline on her steering wheel and cut her brake line. Stephen was afraid for her but proud of her, and he was her private bodyguard. Watching over her deepened the relationship. He was falling for her, and she for him. They both had a common reason for being together 24/7, but it was not his intention to fall for an innocent. He did not want the responsibility, but he knew there was no one else. He began to admire her in ways the doe-eyed brunette. He did not want to. He found himself, when she was not looking, staring too long at her. He was staring at her too long when she slept, ate, the way her mouth smirked when she talked in her self-satisfying know-it-all, as cute and reckless. He wanted her more and more, but he tried as hard as he could not to go there. There, he knew, was not going to be good for either of them. It was that night. She agreed to meet him at their favorite eatery, Meg's Kitchen. It was out on Route 7. This route was in a very rural area, no one around for miles. The lights on the road were scattered and dimly lit. They loved this little restaurant, checkered tablecloths, the cozy, warm fireplace in the middle of the large dining area. It was always stoked and warm, too. It created a glow on Kathy's face. He was in awe. She was making the turn to go into the parking lot of the restaurant. He didn't even have a chance to react when he saw that she was unable to stop her car. He thought, maybe because the roads were icy, because that time of year in that area made the roads slick. But he came to find out later, when he had the car taken to his mechanic, who needed to come out and tow the car from the restaurant. Kathy's hands were shaking while lifting the crystal tumbler to her trembling lips, while he held her close. The mechanic took a quick look at the car while it sat in the parking lot before he towed it. The car had been tampered with. The mechanic stated, "Your brakes were cut. You are lucky to come out in one piece." He kept on hearing the statement over and over. In his head, it meant he could have lost her, and watched helplessly while it happened. They remained together since that night, and until she decided it was not what she wanted. She wanted him, but not that way. She had a lot to think about, even though he told her. It was more for him, not just caring for another human being. He loved her, and now she had to decide while away from him, at home, whether to go back and be his, the way he needed her to be. She wanted so much for them to be together, but not this way. She needed to understand why she had trouble being with any man, but especially the one she wanted to be with. But it was that one night. That particular night she calls to mind the most. That night, he had a nightmare about his mother. Kathy ran into his room. They were not together. They couldn't be. She heard him physically when she had her own night terrors. She did not know as yet why, but she wanted to find out. She came home to find out. Her professor said the answer was in her past. So, hearing Stephen's cries, she ran from her suite. He still had not slept with her yet. He wanted to buy, but he knew she needed time and would wait for as long as it took. Stephen never slept with anyone, and before Kathy, he really never wanted to. He feared his night terrors too. He was going through the same condition. He lashed out, and the last time, it was long ago. The person he was with was not important, but he hurt her physically while sleeping. He heard the most beautiful melody, a song that he remembered from childhood. His mother sang it to him when she put him down at night with his baby brother, Cam. He believed he was still dreaming, since his mother sang it to him too. His thrashing back and forth began to calm down. The wild thrashing and flailing of his arms were beginning to lessen, enough for her to be able to come closer to him. She finally held him close while continuing the soothing melody. He started to ease his breathing. The melody was coming closer and closer to him. He opened his eyes to find who it was. Chapter 12. Kathy's mother yelled out to the back, "Have you seen Mary? She needs to set the table for dinner. Your dad will be home soon from his golf game." Mary put her fingers to her mouth. Shh, shh. She went out the back so she could re-enter the house by the front door. She really wanted to have a few minutes to herself, now that she was not going to have very much privacy, for at least until Kathy decided what she was going to do with her life, whether she would go back to continue her studies up at school, the constant emotional seesaw she was on with her relationship with Stephen. Kathy yelled back to her mother, walking towards the kitchen. "Mom, it's okay, I'm sure. I owe Mary at least a few hundred set tables since I've been gone. I'll do it." She grabbed the utensils from her mother's hands to go set the dining room table. Her mother just smiled at her daughter while handing her the stack of salad plates, silverware, and napkins that were to be placed on the large dining room table. The family these days, just being her parents and Mary, have been either eating in the kitchen or, if the weather calls for it, as it does now since it is summertime. But Regina wants to have dinner with Kathy home in the dining room. Kathy smiled back at her mother, taking the things for the table into the formal dining room. It was a very nicely decorated area, not stuffy like some formal dining rooms. This room was large with a table in the center to accommodate the 8 people that made up the Fitzpatrick family. The chairs were high-back chairs to match the modern-day design. Kathy's mom, Regina, was not much on protocol, but she did love the presentation. Kathy walked over to the break front to pull out the large Irish lace tablecloth. Her grandmother on her father's side, Grandma Katie Kelly Fitzpatrick, Kathy was named after this woman, who came from County Cork, Ireland. The lace was from that area of Ireland. It was a family heirloom, having been in the Fitzpatrick's family for generations. Kathy felt a warmth inside she had not felt in a long time. She was very close to her Grandma Katie. Her formal name was Catherine Ann, who was her favorite grandparent. Kathy thought to herself, would her grandmother give up her identity for a man? She smiled to herself with approval. Well, she already had done just that very thing because she had been married to the man who was Kathy's grandfather for more than 60 years. But Kathy's mother had told Kathy that many in the family said and truly believed Grandma would follow Grandpa, her mother's father, to his grave in short order. The reason for Kathy's smile is that her grandmother Katie, Catherine Ann, not only did not follow her grandfather Frank to his grave, she began to live for the first time in her life. She even climbed a mountain and started wearing pants. This was another first for her. She came into her own after her husband of 60 years of a boring, loveless marriage. She was ready to break away, but the Catholic in her stopped her. But the wild Irish spirit in her won the rounds. She, Catherine Ann, defied Ev. Kathy thought about this story while laying out the place settings. Kathy's mother called out from the kitchen, "I'm not sure if your brothers are arriving tonight from school, but put a setting for them too, just in case. Just set a place for them. Better safe than sorry." It's the same statement that popped into her head at the clinic in Vermont, up at school. This was when she finally decided to order her first prescription for birth control pills, just in case, and it was a good call. After placing the glasses, utensil, and napkins at the individual place settings, she went back into the kitchen for the second round to finish setting the table for the evening's dinner. She began to pull the plates from the hot oven. Her mother liked to warm them up, so the food, when served, would stay hot on the plate. Kathy's mom told her to use the oven mitts. "Be careful when you take those plates out. Use the oven mitts, dear." On second thought, leave those plates in there until we finish our first course. Just lower the temperature on the oven. So Kathy did exactly what her mother Regina had told her to do. After Kathy had set the salad plates and put the green salad out with the green goddess dressing for each person to put on their salad. It was always a good idea to let everyone put their own dressing on their salad. Regina knew what kind of issues that created. In the past, there were arguments about how the salad was swimming in dressing from one, and how you could barely taste the salad from another. Kathy was weight conscious all her life, so her mother made that change, mostly for Kathy's benefit. She did not want her daughter to feel self-conscious that it was her that the change was being made for by her mother. Kathy's mom made one of Kathy's favorites for dinner, in honor of her being home from college. It was stuffed veal chops with sautéed fresh whole leaf spinach, with garlic butter, a rice dish with the sauce from the drippings from the veal chop, and cut pineapples poached in it, own juices. Regina handed Kathy the bread basket. "Can you please put out the homemade Italian garlic bread?" This was one of Kathy's favorite bread. She loved it more now, that it had a totally different meaning to her now. It was not just something to accompany dinner, but Kathy's mind began to wander back to the night Stephen made his special dinner for Kathy. Kathy was not eating bread for a while now because she was trying not to eat bread, since she was on her 100th diet. She was always trying to lose weight. Nobody except her believed that she was fat. She just had a poor self-image. The garlic bread her mother made was wrapped in a cloth napkin to keep warm while being placed on the table for dinner. Kathy stopped in her tracks at the opening of the kitchen at the sight of that succulent large loaf of garlic bread, oozing with butter, dripping from its sides. That soft, succulent, oblong-shaped Italian loaf of garlic bread was bringing Kathy to a very sensuous place. Kathy's mother reached out her hand to Kathy to ease her out of what looked like a sort of trance. "Honey, Kath, what's going on? You are looking at that bread as if it were a sensuous invitation. Something you want to tell me, little girl?" "What?" Kathy was surprised by her mother's inquiry. "Oh, no, Mom, I'm just fine." Kathy's mom just raised her eyebrows and nodded. "Aha, sure you are." Kathy thought her mother could read her thoughts, not the kind of thoughts that were appropriate while setting the table for the evening dinner. Kathy's mother, Regina, said, "I have been serving my stuffed veal chop with garlic bread for years, and I have never gotten a reaction quite like this one. You look more like the simple bread basket is sort of a seduction." Kathy just smiled, remembering the last time she ate garlic bread and who was serving it to her mouth that time, as well as many other areas of her body. It made her shake at the thought. Mary, just fresh from taking a well-deserved shower, came barreling down the stairs. Like was her customary way of coming into the room, she did this just to see the stunned reaction on her mother's face. She entered the room just to stand and look at Kathy with a questioning gaze. "What was that about?" she said to her sister. Regina, Kathy's mother, asked Mary, "Where were you before, when I was calling you to set the table?" Mary just shrugged her shoulders like most 16-year-olds do to their parents these days. Mary suddenly uttered under her breath, barely a whisper, "Somebody took care of it." Mary's mom just raised her eyebrows, which told both the girls they should know that their mother hears everything. "Yes, it was good your sister was here to help me," stated their mother. "Mary?" Jut said begrudgingly. "Yeah, thanks, Kathy, for doing the job I've been doing every night since you have been gone." "It's okay, I'm quite sure I was not put out by doing your job for a night," Kathy stated. Kathy's mother kissed Kathy on the cheek, turning to Mary. "Mary, don't think. Because your sister's home from school, she is doing your responsibilities." Mary just waited for her mother to go back into the kitchen. Mary then proceeded, after her mother left the room and was no longer in sight of the girls, stuck her tongue out at Kathy. The commanding voice of their mother, they knew when she was upset, came from the direction of the kitchen. "Mary, I saw that, young lady." The two girls just chuckled because it was like old times. This felt so familiar to Kathy, and she just wanted to bottle it or put it away in a secret box and take that feeling with her back to school. She still had not decided to go back to school, but she had decided to talk to her parents. After the evening meal was over and the kitchen was cleaned up for the night, how was she going to approach the situation, she thought? What would she say? She was thinking all these things when she heard the garage door close signaling her father had come back from his Saturday golf game. "Regina?" A strong baritone's voice lovingly called to his wife from the front door. Katie's mother lit up like it was Christmas morning. Regina heard her husband call out her name, and she appeared within minutes from the kitchen doorway. She had taken her apron off, removed her flats, and exchanged them with high heels. She primped a little, smoothed down her linen sleeveless dress. Then she took a long look in the mirror leading to the hallway. She went with a smile that lit up her eyes to gladly welcome her man back from the mighty links. She stated with a touch to his shoulders and peck on the cheek, "So, who got the better of who? You or the course?" "Oh," he stated with a happy grin. "Of course I did." Regina just smiled, and her smile lit up his world. Bob and Regina, after so many years and so many tears over those years, not always sad, mostly they had a happy life. They had each other. They knew one day the kids would grow and go away, but they always knew they had each other in the end. They still acted like they loved sick school kids. He embraced her and macked her butt playfully while planting a kiss on her full red lips. Kathy observed, her mother was always beautiful like her sister Mary. Kathy just admonished herself for thinking she was not pretty enough, smart enough, just too average to be the daughter of her amazing mother, Regina. Kathy also thought, how I wish I had that kind of love like her parents with him. But she dismissed the thought. She was not even sure if she was going to see him again at this point. Why can't I have that? She whispered quietly to nobody. She began to answer her own question when her phone buzzed in the back pocket of her sweats. She stuck it in, earlier when she was getting dressed. She looked at it, saying to herself, wow, he can't even make it one whole day, but she knew that could not happen. He needed her. Like a person needed air to breathe, she ignored it. She heard her mother playfully tell her father to stop. Let's go upstairs, he said with a smile. He tried to pull her toward the staircase leading upstairs. He was hot and sweaty. No, you are hot and sweaty. So, go, she said, and took a shower. Dinner will be ready soon. Chapter 13. Kathy's mother was all smiles when her family sat down for the evening meal. Her father, one refreshed from his shower and dressed appropriately, took the seat at the far end of the table. Kathy's mom, Regina, took her seat at the other end of the table. Her place was closest to the kitchen. This allowed her easy access to serve the meal. Her mother extended her hand to her left. Kathy, come take the seat over here by me and Mary. You sit across from her. In this seat, as Kathy's mother pointed to the high back chair across from where Kathy's place setting was on the table. The other two settings on the table sat vacant. They were there, just in case the boys arrived early. Kathy's mother made a sigh. Oh, well, I guess they will be here in the morning. Her husband said, Don't worry, Regina. I spoke to Francis. He is going to swing by from Pennsylvania on his way home to pick up Edmund. He gave his wife of 30 years a reassuring wink. He waited until he saw the smile on Regina's face, knowing that the heaviness of the last few minutes was beginning to clear like a thick fog had just passed through the room, leaving in its wake the smells of a home-cooked meal. Kathy said, "Mom, it's been a while since I've eaten anything that did not come out of a styrofoam takeout box or a Domino's pizza box." This led Kathy's mom, sister, and dad to laugh. Kathy guessed for now the happy sounds were heard once again. Mary started the meal off with a daily prayer of thanks to God. After all, Fitzpatrick was as Irish Catholic as you could get. So, grace was said at the dinner table every night. It was said whether it was in the kitchen or outside on the deck, or in this beautifully appointed room with its oak, pocket doors, crystal colorful Tiffany chandelier, and the beautiful watercolors on every wall, depicting landscapes of country of Ireland, her father's birth home. This was another of his many talents. He took up painting years ago to help deal with the loss of his mother. He loved to paint, and they were very good. Kathy especially loved the one titled Golden Meadows. It was a wheat field of gold as far as the eye could see, looking over the green pastures of his country, Ireland. Kathy's dad had lived in Ireland from his birth until he was a teenager, years with his da and his two sisters, Hannah and Lila, after losing their mother to cancer. So, Kathy thought, if anyone could understand Stephen Rutherford, it would have been her father. Kathy's mother had to snap Kathy out of her worrying thoughts. "Did you hear me?" But it was her dad. "Kath, are you listening? Your mother is talking to you, young lady." "I'm sorry, Mom, what were you saying?" "It's not important, just asking." "What did you think of the meal? I made the veal chop different this time." "Oh yeah, it tastes like sour cream with those white button mushrooms." "So, do you like it?" "Sure, anything you make, you know I will like it." Kathy reached across for the bowl of salad and the bottle of Ranch's Green Goddess dressing. She gave a small smile in her mother's direction, thinking, "Mom, you are always aware of my insecurities?" Her mother smiled back to her, knowing what Kathy was thinking. Kathy's mind left the room again when Mary asked her mother to pass the Italian garlic bread, oozing with the melted butter, dripping off the sides into the bread basket in the center of the table. Kathy was remembering the time Stephen made her eat the garlic bread he made for her with his special meat sauce with capellini pasta, the thin spaghetti that Kathy loved. Angel hair, it was her favorite pasta. The things you can do with it even amazed her. She needed to stop thinking about the games of seduction with Stephen at her family dinner table. The meal satisfied everyone, especially Kathy. Regina stood up to begin clearing the table. "Wait until you see dessert." As she and Mary took the dishes from the table to bring in the dessert, it was a natural frozen strawberry pie with whipped cream on top, accompanied by a fresh, hot pot of Colombian roast coffee. Mary did not want any dessert and excused herself from the table. She wanted to call it an early night, since she was tired from working all day at the store. "Mom, no thanks. I'm going to excuse myself and get to bed early. I'm working tomorrow." Her mother gasped, "You are working on Sunday?" Yes, Mom's retail profits were not a consideration of God's great plan. Kathy's mom just rolled her eyes at her flippant little girl, saying, "You are going to church with us in the morning, young lady," swatting Mary's butt lovingly as Mary ascended the staircase. "Miss me, Mom." Mary's chuckles could be heard all the way up the stairs and down the hallway to the room. The girls would once again be sharing together for now. Kathy got up to help her mom pour the coffee for the three of them. Her dad, all he needed, of course, was an invitation. Once Mary headed up to bed, he had it. "So, tell us what's going on at school." Catching Kathy by surprise? "What?" Her face became white, hoping her mother and father wouldn't notice her surprised expression. But not only did they notice, "Is there something wrong, Kathy?" Well, there it was, the statement Kathy was halfway hoping to hear. She was also halfway not hoping to hear, too. She decided there was time to put a black cloud over this perfect family picture. Denial was one of the 7 sins of grief and stress. She had learned this in her beginning 101 psychology class. She also learned in that same class during a symposium one day that trying to get people to recognize that denial would cause at times a shockwave that could be felt through the whole family for years to come, possible doing permanent damage to that family dynamic. Kathy was not prepared to be the catalyst just yet. She still had not decided whether she would open this Pandora's box, as once you released the darkness, it was virtually impossible to shine the light in such a vastly dark place again, or at least for a long time. So Kathy would stay mute on the topic for now. Possibly while standing at Mass tomorrow would pray to God to guide her way forward with Stephen. Mo, Mom, Dad, nothing is wrong, just settling in, getting used to the family routine. Again, she stood kissing her mom and dad goodnight. Kathy went into the kitchen to scrape the plates to put into the dishwasher. As soon as I finish cleaning up the kitchen, I am going to join Mary to go to bed early too. All Kathy's parents did was smile and say, like they were never apart. She nodded her head in unison to her husband's similar memory of their 2 daughters. Okay, you two, stop. Kathy made another pass-through to retrieve the dessert dishes, while her parents leisurely sat drinking, now their Irish coffees. Her father had gone to the bottom drawer in the cabinet to pull out the Baileys. Kathy recognized the dark brown bottle with the green label, eyeing her father and mother celebrating. Her father said to his beautiful 18-year-old daughter, Kathy was curious, "Celebrating what, Dad?" "Our daughter has made it through her first year of college with a high GPA." Her father held up the college envelope with the embossed gold stamp. Unity All-Girls College. It was in the mailbox. Ralph must have brought it today. "Ralph, still our mailman," said the sassy freshman with a big grin on her face. It was just sinking in that she had aced all her courses. She just wished it could stay light and airy. Kathy could be Kathy Light. But drama followed Kathy. Her parents looked at their daughter, then they looked at each other. They both instinctively knew something was wrong with their shy, discreet daughter, because they prided themselves at being in tune with their kids, at least now they did. They would not lose another one. They both vowed at the memorial for their son, their eldest son, their firstborn son, Nicholas Robert Fitzpatrick. But did they really know their son? How will they react after the smoke clears from the fire Kathy will soon ignite to burn everything down? Will she burn it all down or just scorch the earth a little where the happy picture-perfect house stood, in the quiet bedroom community of the storybook suburbs? As in all storybooks, conflict usually has many forms. Some are from strange, unfamiliar places, yet others are as close as your own backyard. Kathy would soon find out which one she was searching for in her family's world. Chapter 14. Kathy walked into a completely darkened room. Mary liked to close the curtains all the way. When she got ready to go to sleep, she had always been a light sleeper, and even the light from the moon was enough to wake her from a sound sleep. Suddenly, the darkness was illuminated by the light being turned on by her sister. "You startled me," I thought. "You were asleep." She just shrugged and said, "It took you long enough. I've been waiting for you to come up here for more than an hour." Mary smirked at her sister Kathy with her coy little angelic 16-year-old face. Kathy looked at her with a strange expression. "What's that on your face?" Mary just rolled her eyes. "It's my overnight cream for my skin." Mary's face was covered with a green algae facial mask. Mary sat up on her bed, propped up by several pillows. Her bed was against the wall, and the bed Kathy was going to sleep in was across the room against the other wall, by the window facing the backyard. At first, for some reason, she hesitated, just a little bit. Like something made her shiver from the past in the dark, but she still did not know what. She was having these weird feelings ever since she started volunteering in those sleep experiments at her school this year. This was part of her curriculum in her Psychology 101 class in sleep studies. It was being conducted by a very important doctor in sleep therapy. There was a crystal chandelier. She and Mary, her sister, convinced their mother a few years ago to let them have a fancy light. To replace the old Barbie lamp, because it was time, the girls decided to put away the dolls and grow up. The chandelier was an important step to their entry into womanhood. Their mother and her daughters went to the town square mall one day, into a specialty store, and there it was. The girls cried out to their mother, "Can we get this one? Please, we love it, Mom." Both girls crowded their mother and led her to the door of the store. They brought it home and their father hung it up that night. The girls just spent the night in their room looking at the beautiful crystals dangling from the chandelier. They were so fragile. Kathy just stared for a long time, remembering that day. You remember, Mary, when we got this? Pointing up to the chandelier in a melancholy sing-song way. Mary looked over at her sister, just staring, and whispered lightly, "What's wrong, Kath?" Kathy just shrugged, turned to begin to take the pillows off the bed, and whispered back to her sister, "Nothing. I know you, Kath. We have been in this room together for a long time." Correction. Kathy barked at her. We were in different rooms. You couldn't live with my habits. Mary just turned over, and there was a long, silent pause. It was so silent they could hear only the sound of the AC whirring in the room. Then Mary finally said something. "So why were you downstairs so long? Did Mom and Dad grill you about how school was going?" "No, I was just picking up your slack." Mary felt bad. After that statement Kathy made, she knew it meant she had stayed behind to clean up the kitchen and put the dishes from the night's meal in the dishwasher. Kathy finished getting ready for bed. She threw the pink fuzzy Barbie pillow at her sister's back. It surprised Mary, but not enough so Mary didn't throw it back. It only took a few minutes, but they were getting used to each other again. They got a little boisterous. They heard their mother yell up the stairs, "Go to bed now, church in the morning." The girls just smiled back at each other. Mary took the pillow and put it under her head and said to Kathy. Kathy waited until the room was quiet, and then she opened up her suitcase to look for her t-shirt and boy shorts. This is what she was comfortable in before him, and the fancy bra and panties. She blurted out something. "Oh, I just remembered I needed to ask Mom something." She was talking out loud. Mary said, "What do you need to ask her?" She expected Mary to be asleep, but was just dropping off when Mary heard Kathy subconsciously speak about something she needed to discuss with our mother. "I thought while I was home, I would see Mom's friend, the gym. Why are you sick?" "No, I need to get checked out since I started on the pill." Mary couldn't believe what her sister had just blurted out. "You finally decided to start taking the pill?" "Yeah, I was told it would help reduce my cramps. You know the kind of pain I have when I get my period. I was told at the clinic that all the college kids go to town, that the low-dose pill would relieve the severe pain that used to debilitate me. There were days when Kathy couldn't even attend classes at high school. The pain was so excruciating." Mary looked at her older sister, who had been away at college for the last 8 months, and just rolled her eyes. Mary then stared straight at her sister. "So, who is he?" "What?" "The guy, what's his name? Where did you meet him?" Mary was now sitting straight up, her attention laser-focused on Kathy's facial expression. She was now hitting her with rapid-fire questions. "Hey, sis, look at me. I'm your sister, so come on. It has to happen sometime, sooner than later." Kathy just sat there looking at her sister's wide, inquisitive grin from ear to ear and said, "Good night, Mary. Remember, we have church in the morning. Mom doesn't like to be late." "Okay, Kath, good night, but I'm going to find out who it is, one way or another." Mary kept taunting her sister. Kathy just smiled, laid her head down on the pillow after coming out of the bathroom, switching off the light on the wall next to the bathroom door. The room was again in complete darkness. Kathy thought, "I hope he is sleeping peacefully." It hurt her inside to think he was having those night terrors. They have been happening ever since he has been 12 years old, since the loss of his mother and little brother Cam. She was very aware that without her being there, it would be tough for him to sleep in peace. However, she knew she could not revolve her life around him, nor could she. She felt this pain deep into her heart and soul. She loved him so much, the way he touched her, with his fingers in places that made her feel like her body was exploding in all different magnificent ways. She was remembering the last time they were together, and her mind was going in the place, her hands were going. She was doing under the covers what he taught her to do. She was thinking what he said to her. "Think of me when you pleasure yourself. What would I be doing to you at that moment in time?" But she also could not help crying. The tears would not stop once they started, in her room in the dark. She knew she was crying because she could not bring herself to understand that he was as broken as she was. Kathy also started to think that she had to talk to Mary about what her professor in her sleep studies class, Dr. Warner, told her. He told her she must have been having these dreams while growing up. He did not want to alarm her. He did not know how vulnerable she was. He needed to have more time with her, in more sleep sessions, before he could truly diagnose what his hunch was already telling him, that she had been molested as a child by a member either close to a member of her family or, worst case, a family member themselves. He had asked her if she shared a room with anyone in her family. While growing up, he believed they would have been aware of Kathy's parasomnia. This was the same condition that Stephen had. She learned that Stephen, while attending his classes at UVM, this was one of the large universities in the Burlington area, and D. Werner had been Stephen's rapist. Dr. Werner had asked Kathy if she had a sibling at home who might know about whether Kathy used to have these kinds of dreams that disturbed her ability to sleep at night while growing up. Chapter 15. Kathy said goodnight to her little sister. "I'm glad I'm home." Mary made a similar gesture of thanks for her big sister being her roommate again. If only for a little while. For now, she was there. They were together once more. It was a few hours later. The night wore on, no matter how comfortable the AC made the room and the rest of the family. Kathy's body was wrought with heat, and a sheen of cold sweat began to develop on her already shaking, shivering body. She kicked and pushed as if someone was holding her down to the mattress. She flailed and thrashed with her arms as if she was fighting for her life. Somebody was attacking Kathy in her sleep. She threw the light cover off. It landed on the floor next to the bed. She pulled her pillow, the one that she used to sleep with while she was only 12 years old. He told her, "Take the pillow and push it between your legs." The dark form was taunting her with his words, whispering the vile things in the innocent ears of a young girl, not even a teenager. He pushed on her over and over. He put all kinds of things inside her, from a comb, brush, and even the handle of her favorite Barbie mirror. It was a set she got from her parents for her birthday that had just passed weeks before, the set that her mother found in the trash a month later with the mirror shattered and the comb snapped in two. The bristles of the brush were all crushed in and broken. Kathy's mother had asked her what happened to the gift that she wanted so badly. Kathy did not know why it was broken and damaged. It was a complete mystery to her how it happened, but it made her very upset. Kathy went off on her mother. It was a very rare occasion. She had never yelled and screamed like that before. Kathy's mother saw how Kathy was beside herself over a simple comb and brush set, so Kathy's mother didn't continue to question her 12-year-old daughter. Maybe she should have made further inquiries, but she had no idea. Nobody did. Or they just didn't let on. They knew why Kathy was acting differently no more than a month after her birthday. A mother should have known. But she also knew that girls started to act odd. She was changing before puberty. Kathy couldn't get comfortable. She was in a deep sleep, and the dark figure wouldn't let her out of her torturous dream state. He was enjoying her silent and painful cries of a little girl in the night. That he, whoever he was, became a permanent monster in Kathy's life. Happening more often when the day turned into night, it was his time. The professor in her sleep studies class, Dr. Werner, had told her she showed signs of vulnerabilities, as if she had been a victim of sexual assault as a child. He had asked her if she had ever had bad dreams about having her privates fondled or touched by anyone, either forcibly or when she was too young to know what was happening to her. She went deeper and deeper into her dreams. The deeper she went into her sleep, the scarier and clearer the visions came into view. She cried out, "No, no, leave me alone." She kicked and screamed, "I don't want you to touch me. You are hurting me." She yelled, and tears welled up into her grown-up eyes. She was no longer 12 years old. She was running from her monsters in the present, like she had in the past. "No, I don't want to play anymore. You are hurting me. Ouch, it's not fun. I am scared. Make him stop. Somebody, make him stop, please. Help me. He is hurting me. I love you. I'm your sister. Get away from me." Her sister came over to rest her out of her sleep. "No, no, leave me alone," as she kicked at her sister. "Kathy, wake up, Kathy. It's me, Mary. Wake up." Mary shook her hard and picked her up and embraced her in her arms and rocked her. She was shivering all over her body. Mary held her tighter the more she fought her. Kathy opened her eyes to find herself in her little sister's arms, confused and scared, saying to her, "Mary, what's going on? What are doing in my bed?" Mary nary said a word. She just clung to her sister Kathy and hugged her close to her, just trying to soothe her. "Mary, it's okay." So her little sister Mary laid down next to Kathy in her bed and just kept holding her until she noticed that Kathy had fallen asleep, clinging hard to her little sister. It really frightened Mary. It was early next morning. The next morning came with the bright sun shining, taking away the endless darkness. Finally, the night was over, and for now, the terrors of the night for Kathy was at bay until she would have to go to bed to close her eyes once again. When Kathy woke that morning, she found herself clinging to her sister Mary. Kathy was half asleep, confused, worried, and a little out of it. "Why are you in my bed?" Mary looked at her sister with bewilderment, the same expression she had last night when she first heard her sister cry out in her sleep. "Don't you remember what happened last night?" "No, why aren't you sleeping in your bed?" Kathy turned to direct the question to her sister, who was still holding her sister's shaking hand. "You had a bad dream. From the looks of it, it was really bad." "Oh, okay. My professor warned me about this." Mary looked at her again. Now her eyes were completely focused on her, sitting up ramrod straight. "What? Do you mean your professor warned you about you having bad dreams?" Mary braced herself for her sister's explanation. "It's a long story, Mary, and we don't have time to get into it now. Mom will be expecting us downstairs, soon ready for church." "I'm listening to Kathy." Kathy wanted the conversation to end, so she again restated, "We have to get ready to go to Mass with Mom and Dad." "Well, I'll tell her you had a bad night." "No!" cried out Kathy. She nearly became ill and was going to be sick violently to her stomach. She bolted up in bed to run to the bathroom to jump into the shower, hoping the heat of the water would relax and ground her. "Kathy, you just can't end this conversation and hope it goes away, Marty," shouted through the locked bathroom door. "You locked the door on me. I'm not going to let this happen, no matter how many doors you lock behind me to get away." "Okay, but I'm not going to feed or fuel the situation," as she turned on the shower head to helpfully drown out Mary's loud words, but it was nothing compared to the loud voices Kathy was hearing in her own head. She yelled out, hoping this would stop her sister from making her angry. "I didn't come home to bring drama," barked out Kathy while drying off. Still, her sister kept up the barrage, even after Kathy exited the bathroom to begin getting dressed. Chapter 16. The church was just as Kathy had remembered. St. Paul's Church was as old as when it was built in the Revolutionary War. The church was a sturdy stone edifice that, over the years, needed many repairs to continue as the functioning building for the use of the parish. There were many fundraisers to keep the stately old church up to code. Kathy's mother, Regina, and the many Fitzpatricks before her that came to live in the quiet, famous suburb of Suffolk County had been instrumental in helping to make the stately old church, St. Paul's, a historic landmark with the Historical Society of Huntington Township. St. Paul's Church was an old stone edifice, a building with stained glass windows depicting the Stations of the Cross, each window displaying individually scenes of the Passion of Christ. Kathy always loved the windows, especially the one depicting the 8th station. This was the one where Veronica K at Christ's feet, wiping his stained cheeks with her tears and then drying those tears with her beautiful long hair glistening in the sun. The windows brought the illumination of the light of the sun into an otherwise dark day for Catholics, and the small squat building that had a wood nave, a vaulted top on its ceiling leading to the altar, and in the center of the altar, a large wooden crucifix. This made Kathy shudder to see him, her beloved Jesus. She could feel, although it happened more than 2,000 years ago, she wept, as Veronica had, in the way, with sadness, that she could feel to her very soul. This building always made Kathy sad but uplifted. This was the kind of passion all Catholics displayed for their Savior, but mostly the Irish ones, they were card-carrying and suffered in silence. Each of the rows in the church had an ornate yet plain etched cross in each individual pews. Kathy's mother, Regina, took her place in the first pew in the last row, upon entering through the doors of her parish church. Mary and Kathy would come in following her to stand next to her mother, like she had since she was a young girl. Kathy's father, Bob, stood in the back of the church with another usher on the other side of the main entry door to welcome the people into the church for the Sunday morning service, as was his usual duty every Sunday. The priest came in with the altar boys in procession once the entrance song began to come out the pipe organ, lodged in a vestibule, cantilevered out in front of the congregation below. Kathy stood watching the altar boys, and the priest walked down to the main altar, threading through the center aisle like a vine, winding its way through the pews and the people sitting waiting for the priest to stand at the large altar at the front to officially begin the Mass for the Sunday service. He, the priest, was not just the senior officiate at the stately church, but the elder of the priests and a fine diplomat, too. He grasped the hands of all his parishioners as he greeted and smiled through the congregation. He was more or less the fixture that had been there for so long. The congregation, once small and in its infancy, was now grown up, like Kathy. Regina, of his favorite congregants and her family, reached out her hand to the elder priest they call Father Kane. He was the first and oldest senior priest of the long-established St. Paul's Catholic parish. He rarely did Mass anymore. He more or less allowed his younger priests to conduct the daily Masses, but Sunday Masses were his domain. They all came to hear, their favorite spokesperson for God. Father Kane was the spine of the parish. He still was a vital man with his head of snow-white hair around 70 years of age. He stood at 6 feet. He still helped the parish to win the yearly Harvest Festival football game between the priests and the family men of the parish, along with their teenage sons. Kathy's father was one of the many family players on the team for the parishioners. He, in his country Ireland, played their form of football, soccer. He loved both games and excelled in both of them. The Harvest Festival football game, along with the raffle sales to help pay for the families of the parish, who could not afford to celebrate the various holidays throughout the year. Kathy's mom, Regina, even with all of her activities, was one of the biggest fundraisers in the church. And the Harvest Festival was the most lucrative of all the fundraisers, along with the angel tree lighting for the children of the whole congregation. Nick, when he became of age, because he was more than 6 foot, played the Prince Charming of the teen dances. They were held in the basement of the church, and Reggie, as she liked to be called, and Bob Fitzpatrick, along with other parents who were active with St. Paul's, were the ones who most years regularly chaperoned for their kids' teen dances. The church was a fixture of peace and stability in the neighborhood. It also helped the many couples with family issues. This was how Reggie got so close to Father Kane. The elder priest, her family before she was a Fitzpatrick, were elders of the parish. She grew up with the Jesuits. This was the order of priests at St. Paul's, and there was a parochial elementary school that most of the children of the parish went to. Only Kathy, later on, went to the new Catholic high school, St. Catherine's. The rest of the kids went to Huntington High School. That was the home of the Wolverines, the state championship team, that won for more than a decade, until Reggie's son, Nick, left to go to college. Then the parish, especially after the funeral, took on a very solemn air, so it saddened her to go to Mass. She thought of changing where her family went to church, but that was just for a moment, and that moment was only fleeting. She knew this church was her way of keeping grounded, and she needed that anchor of security. Now she is in a better place. There are still days where getting out of bed is hard for her, but she has never been one to wallow, so she just remembers all who depend on her as a registered nurse. It's hard for her indulgers. She just never wanted the luxury. Some would call it ever taking time off. So Father Kane was her Irish rock. Reggie was very grateful for the many blessings in her life, should things were worse for others, and this and her confidant she had in Kane was at times all she needed to know. She was not alone. Her faith has saved her many times, her family too. She was in a terrible way and lost for a while after the loss of her eldest son, Nick. He was her favorite. They talked for hours about all the things he did at school. Kathy's mom could not wait for 2 p.m. every afternoon when he came home from school. He would come home and sit on his mother's bed and tell her of who he met that day and how many touchdowns he made at practice that day. Kathy just wanted to forget what Mary had said to her this morning. She also wanted to forget the letter she had seen when she was 15 years old. That was the night when her father was alone drinking at the family dining table with a half-full glass of what looked like a brown liquor, most likely scotch, at his side. For some reason, he was 3 sheets to the wind, her grandmother used to call it. The Irish drank, her German grandmother used to say. She was unhappy with her daughter, Regina's choice in a husband. Kathy's grandmother, her mother's stoic German mother, was just that way. Even though she really didn't know her daughter's love for this Irishman, why did it run so deep? But Kathy's father, whenever he was upset or concerned, would turn to the bottle. Kathy had a similar problem, that devil on her back too. She was better now, but there were times, even though she was now just 18 years old, where her friends had to carry her home from a party, her being 3 sheets to the wind. Kathy hoped her father that night, as well as previous nights, not making a regular habit of drinking late at night, like the night she came home from babysitting. She remembers it was around midnight. But this night was different. Her father was frustrated and grasping something in his hand, as if he might be strangling someone. Kathy could barely see what he was clutching in a white-knuckled grip, but she did remember in flashes the envelope that was sitting on the table next to the half-empty tumbler that smelled of her father's favorite comforting libation. That event PPPD into her mind recently, especially after signing up and taking her sleep studies course with Dr. Werner. She also remembered that her father promised his mother he would no longer be found, drinking in the middle of the night, in the dark, alone. But if he was still doing the things he promised his wife, he would never do it again, especially after she bitterly threatened to leave him and take the family they built together. This would be a blow to his stellar reputation as an elder of the church in the community. This was another night, years before the incident Kathy witnessed at the family dining table when she walked in on her father, plastered and crying with his face in his hands while holding onto what looked like a letter. Kathy remembers standing in a hallway with her sister and brothers in their home, with her little things packed in her little Barbie suitcase. Her sister had a Jose and the Pussycat suitcase, with all the little things they had in their little girl world. She was only 6 years old, and by the time Mary was 4 years old, the boys were a little older. Regina was telling her husband she could not take her husband's behavior any longer. This made the little ones cry. Mary cried out, and Kathy held her little sister, so that her sobs would not upset her father, who, when he drank, was of a violent nature. Everyone that night was out of control. The girls cried while the boys tried to stand up to their father, especially Nick. He was 10, but he was going to protect his family from the big bad monster his father became when he drank. Regina had only one card to play, and that was to tear her husband's little ideal world apart and lay bare the problems that no one even suspected were part of this picture-perfect family. Now that Kathy thinks about it, it was never a picture-perfect family. From the inside, out, it was as dysfunctional as any other family. Bob Fitzpatrick was a typical Irishman. He came from Ireland, spent many of his days as a teenager, playing rugby and soccer, but he spent his nights, after his mother's death, drinking in the pub with Doc. The illness was long, and his mother's suffering was painful for the whole family, mostly taking a toll on her young son, Robert. Robert Fitzpatrick, the only son of his family with his 2 sisters, felt he was being persecuted. He drifted away from God. He began to destroy himself with alcohol to drown his aches and pains. His older sister, Hannah, saw how distraught and lost he was, so she took the money she was saving for her hope chest, gave it to Robert, her younger brother, her love, to go to the United States to live with distant relatives. He decided to go to university on a visa, and after years of odd jobs as an immigrant, he got a job in the advertising field as a copy boy. He worked his way up the ladder until he was working on such prestigious clients as large pharmaceutical corporations and the United Nations Public Relations Liaison. He had achieved a certain power in his position. He met her as a young nursing student, my mother Regina Mendelssohn, a German Catholic from the island, and a long legacy of Germans who migrated over to this country more than several decades ago. He fell for her, was smitten, and they were married. They started that ideal family I spoke of, and it would come crashing down around him. After he slammed into the wall on that rainy, slick roadway that rainy night, coming home from the city. Regina gave him the ultimatum that was now this night in front of him. Kathy remembers the yelling and her mother stating, it was her and the children or his drinking. She made him choose that night. They all stood in that hallway in their family home as if they were frozen in time, awaiting their father's answer to their mother's ultimatum. He obviously chose wisely, but why was he still drinking? And why is Kathy only remembering pieces of her life as a young child? Her memory gets foggy after she turns. Age 12? Well, not foggy, just twisted and dark. something she is scared to see hidden deep in her subconscious, only to be unleashed like a wild feral animal at night, in her sleep. We thanked God every day that Father Kane helped our father to agree to rehab. It was done in confidence, and still to this day, no one other than our family and Father Kane knew the complete details or the circumstances our family was beginning to unravel. Just as Kathy was thanking God for the many blessings, especially that her father stopped drinking for a long while, until that night, she began to think, why was that night special, and what was that letter about that her father clutched in his hand? And she thinks. She remembers the envelope had a familiar return address, but why would he be holding this letter? That she was sure came from her brother Nick. After he had already been dead, they had just less than a month before attended his memorial service. Everyone was there, but his mother she was unable to attend. She was given a Xanax by the doctor and put to bed. It was just a brush of wind when she felt it. That protective feeling, turning around in the pew of the church to find a hand gently placed on her shoulder. She was startled for a moment, but a smile appeared on her face when she realized her brother, Francis and Edmund, had nudged her over so they could slide into the pew next to her. Kathy was happy to see her two older brothers. Now the whole family was together. The Fitzpatricks were all there, and that was good because she couldn't go through this alone. She needed the support of her brothers and sister. She would wait until after Mass, then she would sit down somewhere and talk to her brothers. She needed a male perspective on this matter. Maybe they could help her understand why he had to treat her the way he did. Kathy thought maybe, hopefully, her brothers wouldn't go looking for him and tear him limb from limb after they found out he was having sex with her in bed. These were nagging questions that she had to decide the lesser of the two evils. She needed to know how she could be able to save a broken man. Her brothers would give her the strength she needed to help her escape from the trap that enslaved her. Chapter 17. Stephen's nights were getting more and more frightening. He didn't sleep much because he knew when he closed his eyes that feeling of emptiness would return. He was alone. He reflected on his evening with Kathy's best friend, Jasmine. Some best friend. She was just like a nest of vipers, lying in wait, ready to strike. Nothing but backstabbing comments. This was not someone I would call a BFF. He thought, as he pulled into their favorite spot for their morning coffee before he Dr. PPD Kathy off at her first class. The class was her Psyche 101 class with Professor Werner. This was also her sleep studies class. Stephen Rutherford knew her professor both from when he was a student at UVM and as a private patient. Stephen's parasomnia was also interfering with his normal everyday life, so much that he needed to find out how to, at the very least, live with the problem if he couldn't erase it. Dr. Werner was also in private practice. His sleep session therapy was world-renowned. People with sleep disturbances came from all over to hook themselves up to electrodes and be observed by Dr. Werner and his team of eager assistants. Students gave their right arm to be invited to be a part of the doctor's work. Stephen, because of his relationship with Dr. Werner and Stephen's father, as one of Dr. Werner's benefactors with his generous endowments to the doctor's work, because of how he helped Jason Rutherford's son with his terrible night terrors, his father, being grateful, became financially involved by way of thanking the doctor to help his son through his childhood problems. Stephen was able to find out about Kathy's volunteer program being conducted with new freshmen from the 5 surrounding schools of the little college town of Burlington. Stephen was on his yearly outing with his father and Dr. Werner after finding out that Werner loved to go ice fishing. Along with all the other thousands of fishing enthusiasts, they came from all over, since it was Vermont and other northeastern states that boast the best locations for the sport. This sport was not for those who could not brave the frigid temperatures of the northeast winters. This was also the best area for all types of winter sports other than ice fishing. It was not just open a hole in the ice and throw in a line. This sport was for people with money. They owned houses that sat on the frozen lake with fire pits, chests of Heineken, and men just finding a new way to escape their family responsibilities, like teaching the kids to ski on the bunny slopes. This was a very big sport, and the 3 of them spent the annual weekend sitting in the ice house, the one owned by Stephen's father, Jason Rutherford. He was born and raised in the city of Burlington, Vermont. Stephen finds out about Kathy being one of Dr. Werner's volunteers by just happenstance. Stephen's father, Jason, said, "So, how is the sleep therapy program going now that I have poured a great deal of my money into it?" Dr. Werner replied back, I am very impressed with the study this time around. I have one in my freshman class. She is very easy to put under because I believe she has suffered some abuse. Jason responded back, "Oh, is she from around this area?" Jason waited on an answer. No, she is from the New York area." Stephen heard the DR say that the girl was a freshman, and in his genius mind put it together. "Oh, so what is this freshman's name?" He waited for the doctor to give that answer. "I can't really give you that information because it would be unethical. I could lose my credentials to teach and practice." Stephen looked at his father and raised his eyebrows. Jason said, "Maybe you don't want to continue to have my funds for your sleep projects." Stephen, like his father, gave his father a smirk, cunning and full of elite entitlement, that Dr. Werner looked over at both the father and then the heir apparent. Dr. Werner was being tugged by the balls. He knew he had no choice if he wanted to get more funding for his programs to continue. "Okay, I'll tell you who it is, but you already know or have a suspicion it's your girlfriend." Stephen then began to concoct a plan to help him be able to sit in one of her sleep therapy sessions. "Okay, I'll let you sit in on the sleep sessions." The doctor, anticipating Stephen's request, "Okay, next time she is scheduled for the sleep session." Stephen thought about what the doctor was saying. "No." Stephen said with a sharp tone to his voice, that meant he was going to keep control of the situation. Dr. Werner had seen Stephen for a long time, and Stephen was one of his best students. He knew how to fuck with people's minds. So he gave the doctor his orders that were going to be followed. He knew to the letter, or Stephen's father's money was slowly going to disappear from Werner's sleep therapy program. Stephen spoke clearly and with authority. "I want you to schedule her next sleep session for next week in the evening. I'm going to drive her there. You will call her and tell her you have an opening for the evening session." Dr. Werner just looked at both father, the mega mogul, and son, Mega Mogul Jr., who was scarier than his father. He swallowed hard. "Dr. Werner!" Just reluctantly nodded his head in defeat and accepted the knowledge of his loss. But he did not like to deceive this volatile young freshman. He had no choice. He needed for his program to be able to continue on. They arrived at the sleep center, which was a division of the psychology department at UVM. The University of Vermont was a large university which housed not only the psychology program, also a law school, journalism school, and the physical sciences department. There was a huge gymnasium. The anchor building was the large medical center. This was the hospital that took care of all the city patrons. In addition to UVM, there were 4 other colleges: the Unity All-Girls College, St. Michael's College, Burlington Community College, and Lake Champlain College of Veterinary Medicine. These colleges made up the core of the economy in this winter A-list recreation village. The remainder of the economy of the small elite village came from winter sports, skiing, winter resorts, and winter festivals, all kinds of winter activities. Burlington was all the way at the top of the state. It was 45 minutes from the Canadian border. Many of the students crossed over the side of the Canadians on the weekends to ski a more challenging mountain terrain, like Whistler's Mountain. This was considered a very hazardous area, and only for the very best downhill skiers, these were considered to be the slopes for the Black Diamond crowd. They skied the most treacherous runs in the Northeast, and often at times, the West in Colorado and Utah. Kathy loved to ski Bromley and Sugarbush. Stephen had promised to take her to the ice festival in Stowe, Vermont. His father owned a ski chalet at the base of Stratton Resort. Stephen talked about the trip that night while dropping her off at her sleep session therapy for Dr. Werner. "So I'm going to be here all night. So I will get someone from the center to bring me back to my dorm," she said. Stephen put up his hand to her mouth and grabbed her chin lovingly, staring her in the eyes to get her full attention. "Stop talking. I am picking you up in the morning after you are finished. Are we clear? Just nod your head to me that you understand." She nodded her head while he kissed her hard on the mouth, opening her car door and sending her out and to the front door of the imposing building in front of her. Kathy turned back to look at him and knew when Stephen said in a commanding way, as if he were ordering her to listen to him and obey. No questions, there was no way to argue with him. She still had reservations about this therapy. She was scared to go forward with this program, but she knew he was supporting her efforts to find out what was happening to her and why she was having these problems. "Stephen, just say that watching her enter the building." "Don't worry, kitten. I will be right there close by, making sure you're okay." He didn't mention to her that he was the one who set up the session. He just remembers how she felt before she just left his arms. It scared him a little too. The unknown variable can always be a scary thing. Her body shook as she managed after his possessive kiss, stealing the breath from her body. He still can hear the gasp lingering in the air as she broke away from it. Stephen had told her in a growl that scared her, "Don't ever pull away from me. Ever." After she got out of the car, shaking from the volatile way Stephen had spoken to her, "Don't ever pull away from me. Ever." She never recalls since meeting him. At any time he has been so stern and demanding, it almost scared her that she really was not okay with him. Staring back over her shoulder as she managed to pull the heavy glass door open and walk into the sleep center, it was the first time she had come there at night. She felt a little timid and hesitant to walk in the large observation room. It was encased in a glass bubble. The walls were all glass around her, and there were numerous beds about the room. Some of them were dressed with yellow sheets and comforters with plain white pillows, and others were dressed in pale blue with the same color in the comforters. But these beds also had plain white pillows. The pillows were all combed cotton. The team, along with Dr. Werner, welcomed her and explained why the beds were dressed differently and that the pillows were all the same because they were of a natural fiber and hypoallergenic, just in case a subject had sensitivity to the bedding. In fact, all of the beds were dressed in natural materials. The bedding was spun Dupioni silks. There was one more thing that was explained to Kathy. This scared her. They were electrodes that would be attached. These would allow for the sleep sessions to be recorded to be reviewed after the session was over. It was necessary to obtain this data, and hopefully she might get the answers she was so sorely in need of. She needed to find out some answers as to why she acted the way she did, but she never remembers her nightmares or her dreams for that matter. She just knows that her sleep disturbances were getting in the way of her living a normal life and having a normal relationship with Stephen, even though he had sleep disturbances. How can two broken people stay together? And this is more disturbing to her than her nightmares. Stephen waited until she was met by one of Dr. Werner's team. They were made up of graduate students. This was the level 2 of the sleep sessions class. The prerequisite was to finish the sleep sessions level 1 class. After he parked the car in the school's parking lot as close to the back as possible, hidden under a large tree so no one could say to his girlfriend, someone saw the very distinct black Porsche as everyone knew the obvious vanity plate cat's eye screwed to the back end on the shiny chrome bumper she gave to him for a gift a few months ago. Stephen pulled his more than 6-foot frame out of the car, clicked the remote, set the alarm, and walked forward toward the large heavy glass door he had just seen Kathy pull open to go into the sleep center. Dr. Werner advanced upon spotting him, grasped his hand to greet the secret watcher. He led Stephen to the perimeter door to the sleep center. Bypassing the room where the rest of Dr. Werner's team was there preparing her, he can view the session in the glass observation room suspended above the actual sleep lab below. He watched as they put the electrodes in various strategic places on her body. Stephen watched intently while the male assistant touched her breast to attach the electrode. He noticed she was wearing her UVM sweats, the little top that he had purchased for her. When they went to the career day the school had recently, he was there to represent the Rutherfords, his father, had a number of businesses that hired the students who attended the various schools in the small elite college town. At one time, that was before Kathy came into his life, he was considered quite a player. Chapter 18. That same afternoon, after the Sunday Mass, the priest, Father Kane, said, "This Mass is over. Go in peace to love and serve our one Lord." The people began to exit the pews to join the procession to greet the beloved priest before leaving the stately church. They were walking out the main stained glass doors to the location where the priest was standing to give everyone their weekly blessing. It was a lifeline for most of the parishioners who attended the little church each Sunday Mass. Father Kane, the elder, stood at the front to greet his congregation to make sure he did not miss one. Young and old alike, this was the way he had been for more than 50 years while commissioned to the small community church. Regina Fitzpatrick, was the last to leave with her family to follow since her husband Bob was one of the ushers needing to make sure everything was put away and buttoned up for the night to be ready for the early morning services. "Father, it was a wonderful service," said Regina. The priest grasped Regina's hand lovingly as old friends do. The father also made a gesture to grasp each of Regina's children's hands. They were all known to the elder priest Kane. The boys had been his altar boys for many years. Father Kane had seen them last when they were pallbearers for their brother Nicholas Robert Fitzpatrick's memorial service. Even though there was not enough to put into a casket to bury, Regina insisted upon it. She wanted to be able to have somewhere to go to visit her son every week, unable at the time of his funeral to attend. They carried a casket that had what was left of Regina's eldest beloved son, Nicholas. After the car blew up, the remains of her son stretched for more than 7 miles along that line roadway. There was barely enough for identification. They had his driver's license among the debris. Everything else was barely identifiable. There were dental records, and his jaw showed an old fracture when the pieces of the lower mouth were somewhat pieced together. His life of 18 years and her life shattered into pieces was all that was left. She insisted on a casket so there would be a burial for the family to mourn. The family knew she needed closure, and they indulged the family matriarch. The only way that closure for her would happen would be if she had a place to visit her son during the important days, his birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. Regina Fitzpatrick was a good Catholic and a good mother. Her family was everything to her life. It was always her life. The soul of her son was the most important thing. She knew, because she was a Catholic, that her son's soul was with God, but she needed this for her sanity and overall well-being. The priest Kane remembered Kathy fondly because of her beautiful voice and how she lent that beautiful voice to the church for many years in the church choir. She never sang anywhere else because she always told everyone she would only sing for God, since it was God who gave her the beautiful angelic voice. Kane said, "You must sing for us before you leave to go back to school." Kathy just smiled, accepting the blessing from her family confidant she has known since her days of being a young girl. She knew his importance to the family and her mother, because it was a very strained time in her family. "I would be honored, humbly, to sing for the church father." Kane just smiled back at her verbal acceptance to the offer. "Well, Bob, your family looks well, and you must be so proud of all of them." Bob answered overall, "Yes, Father, I am blessed and highly favored, then God." Regina said their final goodbyes by way of the final statement she uttered while leaving the church. "Well, we need to get this one to her job." Kane just raised his eyebrows, and Regina just nodded her head. To give acknowledgement of her not being the one to blame for her daughter going to work on a Sunday, "Blame society," she said under her breath. That was not how Regina was raised. When she was growing up, they had something called blue laws. The commercial establishments were not allowed to open on Sundays. Then the law was modified and allowed the establishments to open after 12 noon until 6 p.m. Now it's no holds barred. It was all wide open since no one respects the reverence of the church anymore. Not even what was once called devout Catholics, such as families like the Fitzpatricks. So Kane just finished with, "Have a blessed day. See you at next Sunday's service." The boys walked ahead and Kathy tagged along. "Mom, I'm going with Francis and Edmund." "Okay, do you want to meet us at Boston Legal for dinner later, after we pick up Mary from the mall?" "We have some things to do after we drop off Mary at work," Kathy's mother said. Before anyone could say yes to their mother, it didn't matter. Regina decided for everyone. "Sure, we will be there." As the boys opened the door of the Range Rover to let Kathy climb into the back seat, while Edmund took the passenger seat in the front next to Francis, who would drive, since this was his car his parents gave him for graduation. It was not a new car, maybe about 5 years old, but the way he took care of it, it looked like it was brand new, treasured it. There were even paper mats on the floor in the back to protect the rubber WeatherTech mats. The Black Beauty gleamed in the heat of a sweltering June Sunday afternoon. Kathy sat in the back, while her brother Francis was at the wheel. She began to take a little look into her past. Then at that time, a reason why Father Kane was so special to their family. He kept their family from imploding. It was a night when she and her fellow siblings were very young. It was a faint memory, one she would never forget. She wished she could remember other things about that night. She was so young that she didn't understand why her mother had packed them all up as if they were leaving. They were leaving, her mother said. We are going to stay at Nana's for a while. It was the church and that priest who quickly brought the adults back to their senses. You have a family, Bob. Think of them. And he did. Chapter 19. Stephen was driving around aimlessly. He dreaded going back to that condo alone again. Listening to Us and Them by Pink Floyd from the mix he had created for Kathy. She had one and he had one, so they could listen to the same songs when they were away from each other. He would text her at school and tell her what song he was listening to, and she would put in her earbuds and start listening to the song, with Stephen little rap he put into it between each music line. Stephen loved to listen to Pink Floyd, especially when he was using it to get her ready. She would smile, coyly making the professor think she was listening to his dictation for Elizabeth Barrett Browning in lit class. But she was actually feeling warm down there. She thought to herself and texted him back. I am going to teach you a lesson when I get there, since you made me miss the lesson that was being taught to me in class. She finished her text with kisses and love you. See you later, putting the phone away and getting down to the first and second stanzas of one of the poems by her beloved Robert Browning. She had to make him understand that she had to concentrate first on the romantic entanglement of her two favorite writers, and afterwards she could concentrate on her and Stephen. He liked it the other way around, of course he did. If it concerned him and her, he came first. That song he loved so much made him strong and melancholy at the same time. He was remembering how good she felt when that night she finally got home from school. She was all excited about her studies. He loved that about her. Everything she did received her laser-focused attention. So he waited patiently for his time, but most people would describe it a different way. Like she barely got in the door when he took her from behind and started taking off her clothes, before she could even put her books and bag on the foyer table. Wait, let me get in the door first. And she couldn't even finish the sentence before he had her backed up against the wall in the coat closet. He parted her right there and slipped off his sweats. He didn't have to peel off his shirt because he wanted to save time, so he was not wearing any. He knew she loved to caress his bare chest as he unbuttoned her shirt and took down her pants and underwear, in one move. He would kiss her hard on the lips while he first slipped 2 fingers in, while he made sure she was ready for him. She was more than ready. So he kissed her soft nipples off her breasts until they were like little pebbles. Then he slid down her body with his tongue. Oh, my memory was making it hard for her. He knew he promised, but he couldn't help it. He suddenly impulsively forgot his promise. The hell with that. She should have known I could not keep that promise. Not with her making me so hot, he said to himself before sending her a text. Text. Stephen, I need you here. As he began to sweat profusely from the memory, he was hard as a rock and aching for release. Text. Stephen, I need you here, now. Imagine what I am doing. The text came into Kathy's cell while she sat in the back of her brother's car. She pulled out her phone to read the text. She smiled a little at the text. She knew it was mean of her, but he was obviously suffering. She gave it a minute to collect her thoughts not to reveal anything to her brothers in the front seat of the Rover. She thought, okay, he will like this. She texted him back, just a few words. Text. Kathy, so I guess you miss me, baby. She finished and pushed send. She waited for his response, and it came quickly. Text, Stephen. Okay, baby, what gave you the first clue? The fact that I was telling you I ached for you. The phone buzzed again, and she opened it to read. Text. Kathy, I am sending one more, and that's it. You are making me come, so stop. You promised me space. Well, he started to deflate, but he knew what the answer was in his head before it came out of his mouth. I am going to her if she won't come to me. She has been away long enough. If I let this continue, maybe she may not come back. Just as he was turning into the parking lot to his office in the back of one of his family's businesses after reading the text from Kathy, he thought maybe she wants to keep playing with me. So he pulled out his phone and read the ID. It was definitely not from Kathy. The screen showed the name Daphne. He began to think, should I pick it up or ignore it? Call Daphne. This was the ghost of his past, but he knew if he did not pick it up, she would just keep calling. So he gripped the handset hard until his knuckles were white, took a deep breath to calm his anger. Daphne, what do you want? I thought I told you after the last time we met to never call me again. He waited and she spoke. Stephen, why are you being that way to me? Are you forgetting how we used to make each other feel in the rich darkness of our private hideaway? He could not contain himself. What do you want? She tried another tactic. Well, do you think that is a nice way to greet an old flame, darling? He hated when she spoke to him like this. Again, he tried to compose himself. He had just come from the gym, but now he needed to go a couple more rounds. Stephen loved to kickbox. His gym had a mixed martial arts program he installed after Kathy told him she wanted to learn, and nobody else was touching any part of her body. So he hired a great teacher, a previous mixed martial arts junior champion, and his female partner. So it was going so well that other women began to come to take the class after Kathy told everybody in school, and it spread like wildfire. What do you want? You caused a real big problem the last time we crossed paths? Oh, I guess you are talking about that little waif. Her name is Kathy. Well, I'm here at the Radisson Hotel all alone. Just myself and a glass of our favorite Italian Merlot. You are in Vermont? I am in Burlington. Come over and keep me company, she said, smiling through the phone. Why are you doing this? You know I love her. She is not good for someone like you, Stephen. You can't have a normal relationship. Who are you to tell me that? I am the one who put you together after you mother. My best friend, and you little brother Cam died. You had no one else. You were just an inconvenience to everyone. I took care of you. You used me. I was only 17 years old. You will never be fulfilled by her. She is a mere lost one. That's why you want her. She is someone you can dominate. That's all people like you and I know, darling. She loves me, he said, needing to convince himself of that fact, if no one else. She loves you more than why is she not with you now? She knew she had hit a nerve, so she continued to taunt him. There was a long pause. Silence dominated the air. Honey, it does not matter. She cannot take care of you the way I can. You know this to be true. So I'll see you in 30 minutes. I will be at the bar, or we can meet in our room. Goodbye, Daphne. Don't call me ever again. Lose my number. Forget you knew me. He abruptly ended the call. Stephen parked his Porsche in his designated parking space as the owner of the building where the theater was that his family owned. He entered through his private entrance in the back of the structure. He began walking with long strides in his gait. He now had a clear purpose. Taking his key out of his pocket to unlock the door of his private office corridor, walking down the dark hallway, flipping on a light in the center to see his office door in the corner at the end of the hallway. He took another key and unlocked the door, stepped in and shut it behind him. He went over to his desk, switched on the lamp upon his desk, bringing enough light into the room so he could power up his computer. He needed to set things in motion because she was coming to him, or for now, he was going to her. The email was to his father, who was in New York City for a business conference. Ever since Kathy, they had become closer. She made him want to be a better person than his previous narcissistic self. This was good for his future, because her love was pure and brought out his better angels. Why did he have to treat her that way the last time they were together? He was going to try to fix that right now. He emailed his father, who had asked his son to come with him to the Business Investors Conference in NYC, but he made an excuse about someone having to stay and make sure the businesses were running smoothly. His father knew that he was making excuses because he was just licking his wounds after Kathy had left for her home on Long Island. Stephen kicked himself. Mentally, why didn't I go with her? We could have gone together, and I would attend the business conference, and she could on to visit her family on the island. She didn't even have to bring me, but at least we would have stayed together. He was afraid that without his influence, the spell would be broken, out of sight, out of mind. No, I really don't believe that of my kitten. But now where was he? He was in a bad place, and Daphne was too close for his comfort. He needed to get out of Dodge. Well, Vermont, at least. He wrote Dad, "I need to get to NYC ASAP. Can you help me, please?" This was rare for Stephen, and his father would be grinning from ear to ear upon receiving the email from his son, Stephen. Okay, thought Stephen. I see you saying gotcha. Stephen smiled at the thought. Yes, his father had him, but only because it was a means to an end. He was in a bad place without Kathy by his side. Daphne had her sent out for him. Chapter 20. Stephen began to write the email to his father. Jason Rutherford. Waldorf Astoria Hotel, New York City. Dad, so how's the conference? I have decided you are right. I'm coming to meet you. Please reserve a suite at the hotel for me. I will be arriving in the company G4. Rex emailed me the other day to say you left at my disposal. I will be arriving in a few days via the executive airport at Teterboro. I just need to finish up some loose ends here. I will let the managers know we are out of town, but not out of reach. I will arrange for a car before wheels are up. Your loving son, Stephen. Oh, Kathy, look at what you are doing to me. But for you, I will try to be the man you want me to be. Just tell me you are keeping the doors open for me. Chapter 21. Stephen needed to get things done. He was not going to give up on them without showing her how good they were together. Okay, so they settled everything with sexual foreplay, so they both liked to touch and taste each other. They starved for it when it was not there. He hoped she did too. No, he knew she did. Yes, it would be hard for both of them. His life was loveless until he met her. Her life was full of confusion and broken promises. She still did not know what happened to her all those many years ago, and what she would do once she finally found out. He only knew what he saw and heard that night at the sleep session in the psych department at UVM, where they conducted sleep deprivation studies. It scared him, but not for himself, but for her. He knew when she found out she would need him more than ever to pick up the 1 million pieces she would break into because someone out there knew what Kathy Fitzpatrick had gone through. They were not her friend. She would be blindsided by the ones closest to her. The Fitzpatrick family. Chapter 22. Stephen was just packing up his car to drive to the private executive airport where his family's G4 was waiting for him to take off. Just as he was getting into his car, a dark blue Trans Am parked alongside, blocking his ability to pull out from his space where he usually parked his car, in the back of the movie theater his family owned for more than 50 years. "Well, I'm glad I caught you. Looks like you are on your way out of town," said Gary. This was the slime ball that tried to molest Kathy the first night Stephen met her at that dilapidated house in the woods. Stephen opened his car door and raised his stature to his full height of 6 feet 3 inches. His boots were firmly planted on the ground. He was nothing less than the vision of a Spartan god. He was solid and fit. He raised his head up to stare his gray eyes at the useless obstacle in front of him. His gray eyes were intense to look as though a storm was about to be unleashed. He was calm, confident, the quintessential businessman. He looked dangerous in his black jeans and black t-shirt. He was not someone to mess with. "Your car is blocking my way." "Did you forget our drop? We need it for the party this weekend." "I have already told you I am not doing that anymore." "Not doing what anymore? Getting my supply." "You will have to get your supply from another supplier. I'm out of it. Now please get out of my way. This is because of that little piece of C-cage. Be careful, you are making me mad." "Look, Stephen, we go back a long way. I am counting on you. My mentor is counting on me. I'm sorry, you will have to do your counting elsewhere." Then Stephen reached into his car to pull out his 9mm. "Oh, it's that way, is it?" "I don't have time for this, Gary. I'm out. Now, tires are expensive unless you want me to shoot up yours and get out of my way." "This is not over, hotshot. It's over, and if you threaten me or my girl again, I will not just be shooting your tires. So you have 60 seconds to move that car unless you want it towed after it is shot all up." Lifting the gun to make a point. Chapter 23. He decided now was not the time to get into a confrontation. He knew what to do, but first he needed to get a little catnip for Stephen's little kitten. He would take care of that this weekend at the party. He needed to invite special guests to this particular party. Her kitty. "Here, kitty, come to Gary. time to set the trap. First, he needed to go hunting for some thirsty girls. There were 3 in particular. One of them, Gary, was aching to have in his bed, ever since he started following her around after he saw her with Stephen that last week. He followed them to a little cafe after Stephen had agreed to pick her up at the dorm so he could get some kind of update on Kathy's situation at her family home on Long Island, New York. Gary has been keeping tabs on Stephen since he cooled off with getting the product for his parties. He was told by his mentor to get Stephen back in line. Gary knew it was that girl. She was trouble, but he knew how to get leverage on her in turn. Stephen would be disarmed, and to save his little kitten would do anything. This was the plan that Gary would set in motion. She would help him. It was once her and Stephen, but now that Kathy took that position of comforting Stephen, she needs to get back in that nook that she used to find her happy place in his arms. She knew she could not keep Stephen with love, but she was not into that. She liked bondage and sexual manipulation. It was more her speed. She needed to prove to Stephen it was more his speed too. Stephen would not make any more drug runs. This upset the status quo, and Gary was not going to have his dollar's money messed with because of some little co-ed tryst. He knew Stephen. They grew up together, cut from the same cloth. He liked it hard just as Stephen used to like it hard, but now with Kathy, he became real. This was not what Gary would accept. Gary knew how to make things happen. By using Stephen's daddy's private air fleet, he would make a big score. It would not be easy, but it would be worth it. If Gary didn't get Stephen back on board with a product his mentor would replace him permanently, he knew what that meant. His mentor shaped a hand into a gun aimed right at his head between the eyes. It was the last time they were in the same room together. She could not save him now. She still was his partner, his main lady, but she had lost credibility when she lost power over Stephen. Things would not be the same until Stephen was working the circuit. Again. Chapter 24. Kathy Boston Legal was located right outside the town mall. This was where Mary Fitzpatrick worked. This was where the store G&G was located, where Mary worked part-time. It's where Kathy and her used to shop for their back-to-school clothes. Frances pulled up to the front entrance of the Boston Legal restaurant to let Kathy and Edmund out to get in line to make the reservation for dinner this evening. The whole family was eating together. The restaurant didn't take reservations in advance, so this was the only way to get a table in the popular, crowded eating establishment for the locals. So if you waited more than 1 hour, put your name on a list, and you were lucky enough to get seated for dinner. Since this was one of the favorite family eateries in the community, it was nearly 6 p.m., a very busy time for the restaurant. This was the only eating establishment that was right outside the rear entrance of the mall, right on the same property. So that was the reason why it was always jam-packed, and it took more than an hour, sometimes 2 hours, but it was definitely busy on Sunday. This was family night. The day was church, and then spending time with each other, doing family activities, topping it off with a meal called family-style cooking at Boston Legal. It has become a tradition. Anyone who was anybody would be seen at the popular eatery, Boston Legal. The restaurant was a standalone box structure. It had actually been, at one time, the community movie theater where they played dollar movies, but progress pushed it out with the multiplex in the next town. So the owners could not sustain through the many evolutions the community was experiencing with the increase in population. This was when a younger, up-and-coming, preppy 30-somethings moved into the area and basically took over the social scene. Once was full of old established seniors, conservative and traditional God-fearing. Now it was going to be a younger, hip generation. With radical ideas like instead of the corner barber shop and Lily's hair den, it was now going to be large nail salons with technicians who only lived to serve the young set. Now were the female executives replacing the Betty Crocker, Susie homemaker with the evolution of the young working mother. This was about change without permission. Boston Legal was famous for its Boston lobsters. Kathy loved seafood, and lobster bake platter was the favorite of the Fitzpatrick family. They didn't always go out to eat. This large family, it would cost at least a C-note to feed this family of 6, especially when 3 of them were 180-plus pounds and more than 6 feet in height. The boys were human bulldozers when it came to feeding them. Regina Fitzpatrick got a lot of joy watching her boys eat. They were all healthy eaters, including the girls, especially when it came to eating lobster. Kathy's favorite appetizer was lobster bisque. They made it to her liking there with plenty of butter and huge chunks of lobster. Kathy usually only ate appetizers, never entrees. It was the thing about her weight. She unfortunately was the only one who thought she even had a weight problem, at least not enough to be concerned about any longer. Now she works out regularly with Stephen. This was when she was with Stephen. He was the only one who ever understood. She still was so confused because of the way her parents raised her. Now she was looking as though she was working out with a trainer, and wouldn't they like to know who? She just couldn't go an hour, a day, before she would start thinking about him. He loved lobster too. He loved it dripping with butter and eating it on top of her, while she sucked at the lobster, and he sucked at her. Chapter 25. Frances was walking into the front lobby entryway to see Kathy sitting in the gray leather couch just inside the lobby. This couch was there so people could sit while waiting on their reservation. Frances spotted Kathy sitting on the couch. He looked at her to see her turn her head to the line where her other brother was standing to make their reservation for the family dinner. Frances went over to the line to see how much more time between reservations. He knew his parents and Mary would be arriving in the next 30 minutes, expecting to be seated for dinner. Right before Edmund gave his name to the hostess for the reservation, since he was the next person on the line to get a table for dinner this evening, he slowly moved up in the line to overhear the man in front of him who was giving his name. The hostess said, "Name." The man in front said, "Holloman." Kathy's stomach started to do flips. She had not eaten all day, and the feeling in her throat was causing her pain. Her body started to convulse and retch. Her brother Francis looked over to see her in discomfort. He went over to her to see what was wrong with her. Just before he could ask her what was wrong, "Francis, I thought that was you, Mark Holloman. Small world." "Mark, have not seen you in ages." Kathy just then jumped up, doubled over as if someone had punched her in the gut, and ran out of the room to the restroom. She found the ladies' room and frantically pushed the door open, barely making it to the stall. She managed to open the stall door in time, pull back her hair before violently retching and throwing up into the toilet. She had nothing in her stomach, but she couldn't stop dry heaving. It went on for several minutes before she could calm herself down. After what seemed like a lifetime, exactly 8 years, she just sat in front of the toilet, spread out on the floor, propped up against the stall door in tears. It was the hostess who was asked by Kathy's brothers to go in to check on their sister, Kathy. "I'm here." "It's the hostess. Your brothers wanted to know if you're okay?" "Yes, can you tell them I will be out soon?" "Okay, can I do anything for you to make you feel more comfortable?" "Do you have a warm towel? I would appreciate it, thanks." "Okay, yes, I will get you one." "Thank you." "No problem. What's your name?" "My name is Terry, with a Y." "Okay, nice to meet you, Terry." The hostess left the bathroom and went to fetch a warm towel to bring it to Kathy in the ladies' room, not before she stopped to tell her brother, "Your sister says she needs a minute." "Okay," Frances said. "By the way, what's your name? Mine is Frances." "Oh, my name is Terry." "Thank you, Terry. You have been so kind." Kathy could hear her brother flirting with the hostess. "Okay, Frances, I really need that towel warm." Just before she finished the thought, she heard Terry say to her brother, "I need to get this to her. She is waiting." "Okay, can we talk later?" said Frances, seething with anticipation for her answer. Terry said, "I'd like that." She walked into the ladies' room, at the end of the hall in the large corridor next to the kitchen. "Here's the warm towel. Are you okay?" "Thanks, Terry." "Hey, your brother is cute. Is he available?" "Seems to be, or he wouldn't be flirting with you. He is loyal, never cheats." Terry was smiling after Kathy told Terry her brother was one of the good ones. Kathy needed to compose herself and make an excuse to get out of that restaurant while she still was able to before the rest of her family arrived. She didn't know why, but after hearing that guy's name set her off. Besides, she needed to talk to Stephen. She missed him. She needed to hear his voice. It always put her at ease. She still hadn't made her decision, but she knew she couldn't stop thinking about him and his warm body next to hers. Kathy's mom, Regina, had heard that Kathy had been feeling ill. "Kathy, honey, are you okay? It's Mom." "Oh, great. Now the whole family will be here soon." She still had not heard Mary's voice chime in. "Hey, Kath, it's Mary. You want me in there with you?" "Okay." Kathy thought to herself and spoke too soon. "Well, if I don't say something, they will all come in here like the female militia." "Yes, Mom, I'm okay. No, Mary. I'm good. Why don't you go get out table and stop embarrassing me?" Kathy murmured under her breath, gritting her teeth. "What, dear? What was that last thing? I didn't hear you." "Nothing. I'm okay. I just need a minute. Go find the guys. I'll be right out." She was stuck. Now her mother would never let her out of there without going to CVS to get a thermometer and take her temperature. What was she thinking? She probably had one already in her purse. After all, she was a nurse.